It's that time of year again to look at one of the most popular, powerful, and most creative companies out there, Disney. But the truth is, Disney's been pretty busy since I started Disneycember, buying up a lot of other very popular and creative properties. Two of the ones that have gotten the most attention are Marvel and Star Wars. Two universes that Disney has breathed life into unlike anything we've seen before. Marvel now has a gigantic cinematic universe that all connects, and one of the most popular film series of all time has been reborn, making up for what many consider the sins of the past. Well, seeing how these are not only under Disney, but have given birth to some gigantic creative realms, it only seems fitting to take a look at these two. The downside is there's not enough Marvel or Star Wars yet to fill up the entire month. So, once again, I'll be looking at all the ones I haven't touched on yet. All the Disney movies that have yet to be given the disneycember treatment. And naturally, not only will I be looking at all the Marvel movies and Star Wars movies, as well as the special editions, but I'll be going over the new ones coming out, like The Good Dinosaur, and of course, The Force Awakens. Now, as many of you know, copyright has gotten even tighter over the years, so just to be safe, we're going to be using images on this one. But they're still the same length, and they're still the same opinions that you would expect. Or maybe not expect. You just have to watch to find out. It's the biggest mishmash of properties ever, but hey, that's Disney for you. And we're here to look, analyze, and have fun with some of their most enjoyable films. So sit back, everybody. This is Disneycember, the Marvel, Star Wars, and everything else edition. I guess it only figures to start off with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, seeing how much it's changed things and how incredibly long-going it is. And this universe began with Iron Man. Going in, I knew very little about the comic. I knew it was just a guy in a metal suit who flew around and shot up stuff. I had no idea the backstory, the characters, or anything like that. So it was kinda nice going in with fresh eyes and nothing to really compare it to. Robert Downey Jr. plays Tony Stark, a technology-obsessed billionaire who likes to make weapons of destruction. He's arrogant, a playboy, and totally full of himself. But that all changes when a terrorist group kidnaps him and forces him to make a weapon for them. He befriends another kidnapped technician and they decide rather than make the weapon that they want, they make one to get the hell out of there, under the guise of a terrorist bomb. After creating a pretty badass suit and escaping, Tony decides to devote his life to no longer destroying lives but rather saving them. Thus, he puts together the Iron Man suit, starts flying around the world and stopping trouble wherever he sees it. The only problem is his partner businessman, played by Jeff Bridges, doesn't like the changes he's made and tries to make his own robotic suit to stop it. Along with his secretary Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, and his bodyguard, played by Jon Favreau, the film director, it's high-flying technology to see who can do the least amount of damage and the most amount of damage. Again, having no idea how much this connects to the comic, I have to say the story for this is brilliant. We've seen these kind of tales all the time, the Moses story where someone is bad, goes into exile, and comes back a hero. But here, it's a good update. With our obsession on technology, this makes a lot of sense. And Tony Stark represents everything that people want to be nowadays. They want to be obsessed with technology, but they also kind of want to be full of themselves. They want to be doing good things, but they want to have the badass one-liners. They want to be smooth, but they want to be troubled. They want a life of luxury, but still doing some pretty badass things. Creating the best with the best, and the best from the least. It's also nice to see a superhero we haven't seen in a while that has technology that probably doesn't exist now, but you could see existing kinda soon. And he doesn't just use gadgets like Batman does, he surrounds himself in the technology. It's all down to his wits. And the best thing about it is that it comes from a brilliant mind. He doesn't just rely on people to build it, he builds a lot of it himself as well. He's a guy who utilizes every resource that he can, and yet he's still so crazy. In some respects, he's a drunk and a loser and a womanizer, and he's just kind of a dick. But his need to want to do good, especially from such a troubled past, makes him so incredibly interesting. And at the center of that is Robert Downey Jr., who makes this movie. Now don't get me wrong, this is still a good film, but if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be half the movie it was. This is the ultimate comeback performance. This guy has had a shaky past, and now he's the movie star everybody wants to be. He always has the great one-liner, and even if he doesn't, he can say it so that it sounds like a great one-liner. Just like the transformation of the Iron Man character, this guy is transformed as well. In many respects staying the same, but in others, making the exact right choices at the exact right time. Now, is it perfect? No, there are a few problems, especially in the second half. This movie reminds me a lot of Batman Begins, where the first half is some of the best exposition and build-up for a backstory ever, and the second half, when they have to get to the action, is kind of underwhelming. Yeah, it's neat seeing him fly around in that metal suit, but he doesn't really do that much action with it. And the big battle at the end is just against another guy in an even bigger suit, and yeah, something about that just seems kinda dull. At first, Jeff Bridges, who's kind of unrecognizable in this, seems like he'd be a really good villain. But then when he puts that dumb-looking outfit on, he just kinda looks like a video game baddie. Even the lines he says are kinda corny, and he says them kinda corny, and I don't know, this wasn't the movie we started out with. This is more like how the Disney Channel would do a superhero climax, not this movie. It's not god-awful or laughably bad, it's just not as engaging as the first half. But the stuff that's good is just too damn good. The main lead is likable, the technology is inventive, the story is solid and very easy to understand and relate with, the comedy is fresh, the side characters are entertaining, it's just a good, strong superhero flick. I guess I should probably mention the after credits sequence, which now is played at the end of every Marvel movie, with Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury saying that he's starting up a team. Now, some people out there got really excited because they knew he's talking about the Avengers. But here's the thing, a lot of movies had to be continues at the end and after the credits, and a lot of times they never went anywhere. So even though there's that little hint, nobody really got that excited yet. Everybody kind of thought, oh yeah, wouldn't it be cool if that happened? But nobody actually was thinking, oh yeah, it's happening. This big universe where everybody's gonna get their own movie and they're all gonna come together, yeah. This is going to be one of the biggest things to happen to blockbusters ever. It was just a little tease to show what could happen, but none of us knew what was actually lying ahead. And now, looking back, it's kind of cool that these little end credit sequences that people used to just roll their eyes at and say, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, now people look forward to at Marvel movies. Because they've come through, because they've proven themselves, because they say, hey, when we give a hint this is coming, it's really coming. It's interesting to watch it now years later knowing what this little teaser was going to lead to. Little did we know that this was actually a fantastic start to a cinematic universe that was about to explode. Let's continue looking at the Marvel Cinematic Universe with The Incredible Hulk. Now, it's impossible to talk about this movie without talking about the film version that came before The Hulk. Many people regard it not as one of the worst comic book movies ever made, but one of the biggest comic book mistakes ever made. The movie was directed by Ang Lee, who just got done doing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. This is a very good, talented director, but he was obviously the wrong one for this. The movie was too abstract, too dramatic, too slow-paced, and somehow made the story of a giant green man who smashes things boring. So it was pretty tough to do a reboot several years later with that bad taste still in our mouths. Is it much better than the last one? Well, yeah, but it's still not that, Okay, let's look at the story. The film brilliantly starts off with an opening credit sequence that actually kind of shows what happened in the previous film. Bruce Banner is a scientist who discovers this formula that makes him a green monster, endangers his girlfriend, who's the daughter of a general, gets chased by the military, and disappears into the Amazon. That is the exact plot of the previous film, and yet it's not exactly a sequel. If you came into this film not seeing the first one, you could just see it as, oh, this is the backstory of this character. But there's just enough little changes that you could see it as a reboot. It's very, very clever that way. In my opinion, it's probably the smartest thing in the movie. Bruce Banner this time is played by Edward Norton, which seems like a good choice. He spends his time now in the jungle trying to find a cure for his condition. But the army, as well as his girlfriend, played this time by Liv Tyler, are still on the lookout for him. One man volunteers as Guinea Pig, played by Tim Roth, who also chases Banner while starting to get injections, turning himself into a giant green monster. Thus the movie ends with Hulk versus Hulk, with one giant green monster pounding another giant green monster in a city. On paper, it sounds like this would be done a lot better, and even in the film it kind of is. Edward Norton is a very good replacement, and he does a great job in the role. I'm always impressed how a guy with such a baby face and a high-pitched voice can come off as such an intelligent badass. Everything he says just sounds legitimate, you know he's not bullshitting around ever. Tim Blake Nelson plays a good scientist who may or may not be evil, and Tim Roth, once again, is a very enjoyable villain. The surprising downside of this movie is that once again, the wow factor is very minimal. At first, the buildup is great. You see the Hulk in the shadows, it's kind of hard to make him out, he makes this appearance in a factory behind the smoke, and it's really good. But then the more you see of him, the less impressive he seems to be. I mean, yeah, he growls and snorts and jumps around and throws things, but when you think of a Hulk movie, you want to see the Hulk do really cool stuff. Even the first film at least had some scenes where he's throwing a tank and jumping on planes. Here, he's just kinda running around. And I know the argument, shouldn't the focus be on Bruce Banner and his emotional struggle and all that stuff? Sure, but it's still called The Incredible Hulk, and we want to see the Hulk do something incredible. And you just don't see much of that in this film. Even the complicated plan from the villain kinda seems out of nowhere. And I know you can make the argument, yeah, the serums and everything, they're making him crazy, but haven't we seen that a lot of times before? Hasn't it been done a lot better when you see their descent? With this guy, it just seems like, oh, I want to stop him because it's my mission, and now I'm just kinda nuts. I don't know, Javert he ain't. Hell, even Javert isn't Javert, but that's another story. It also feels like they're setting up some things that now in hindsight don't really go anywhere. Like there's a scene where Tim Blake Nelson gets knocked out and you see him almost kind of go through a weird transformation. You think, oh, what's this gonna be? Is this gonna be a new villain? Is this gonna be a new bad guy? But no, he never appears in any of the other movies, at least not that I know of. On the whole, I guess I wasn't really upset that I saw it or anything. I didn't feel like any time was wasted. It just didn't feel like it was anything that spectacular, or even really that interesting. It was the perfect definition of okay. You want to see Edward Norton be okay? You want to see Tim Roth be okay? You want to see the effects be okay? That's what you're gonna get, an okay movie. But again, it's the Incredible Hulk. Why are we only getting okay with the Incredible Hulk? I don't know. I know this movie kind of got panned when it came out, and I don't think it's quite that bad. Like I said, I don't even really think it's really terrible by any means. It's just kind of underwhelming. Once again though, I have to talk about the after credits sequence. In this one, you'd think the movie's over and they're just gonna have a little throwaway joke at the end, but out of nowhere, suddenly, there's Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. This is very common nowadays for Marvel movies, but back then, you never saw this. You never saw an A-list actor from a Marvel movie suddenly come in saying, hey, remember that thing we teased at the end of our other film? We're really fucking doing it. And this is when Robert Downey Jr. suddenly exploded as this big celebrity. So to suddenly see him pop in at the end, not just for a little laugh, but actually saying, yeah, we're holding true to our promises, it was actually kind of chilling. People suddenly start to say, holy smokes, are they really doing this? Are Iron Man and a Hulk gonna be in a movie? And if so, does that mean we're gonna get Thor, Captain America, and God knows how many other Avengers are out there? The idea was suddenly seeming possible. So I guess in a very strange way, the most incredible part of The Incredible Hulk was the credits. And I guess you could take that as an insult, but they were done really well. But what's I say about the rest of the movie? Like I said, it's passable. Not good, not bad, just passable. If you're in the mood to see a Hulk film that's better than the first one, but still doesn't quite reach that level of incredibleness, give it a rent. It's worth a few hours of your time. Iron Man 2, the sequel to one of the biggest superhero films that ever came out. At the end of the last Iron Man movie, we see a superhero do something that I don't think I've ever seen a superhero do in a movie. He reveals his secret identity to the world. When does that ever happen? It's always to a love interest or a close friend or something like that. Whoever just admits to the world that they're a superhero. It's something I've never seen before and got me really excited for the sequel because you would think, wow, this is gonna go places we've never seen a superhero movie go before. And in some respects, it does. We see the life of a superhero if he was a celebrity. Tony Stark has taken the law into his own hands, is flying around the world and stopping evil wherever he sees it. And the government, in kind of a confusing way, is powerless to stop it. He's more popular than ever, everybody loves him, and of course, he has his vengeful haters. Mickey Rourke is a villain who vows vengeance against Tony Stark because of some wrongdoing that his father did in the past. He attaches these electric ropes to his hands and suddenly he's one hell of a badass mother. But that's not the only thing going wrong. Tony's heart is slowly giving out because of the electronic device that he's using to keep him alive. As put so eloquently, the device that's keeping him alive is also slowly killing him. On top of that, he's upgraded Pepper Potts to take over his business, a new bodyguard named Black Widow, played famously now by Scarlett Johansson, enters the mix, and another big corporation wants to take down Stark by teaming up with Rourke and creating even better war machines. In fact, one of them is even called War Machine. When this film came out, people hated it. All they could do is talk about how god-awful it was. Now don't get me wrong, it still did really good at the box office, but everybody just despised the hell out of it. Does the film deserve such a bashing? Well, kinda, but I don't know if it deserved quite as much as it got. I guess I'll talk about the good stuff first. It does show kind of the price of celebrity. Tony of course loves the attention, but he realizes that he can't escape himself. No matter how hard he parties or gets drunk, all his misery is always waiting there for him, except now it's in public and everybody can see it. When he gets in a fight with a best friend, suddenly it makes news. And it makes it even harder for him to figure out how to solve his problems. Mickey Rourke as well is a great choice for a villain. He has a wonderful voice, he has a perfect look, he has the strength, he just came off of a huge hit movie. It's an ideal choice. But this does all build up to the biggest problem with the movie. It goes nowhere. Remember that problem with Tony's heart? You could have cut that out and not miss anything. You know how Mickey Rourke is spending most of the movie building these incredible weapons? It's only around a few minutes at the end. Hell, you know how Mickey Rourke is supposed to be the villain in this? You barely see him. In fact, the main bad guy is just some asshole in a suit. Wait, didn't we already have some asshole in a suit in the last movie? Yeah, we get it, big business bad, but come on, we just dealt with this guy. When there is fighting in the movie, it doesn't really connect to anything that big or epic. Iron Man fights with his friend. Well, okay, looks cool, but who cares? Wouldn't it be cool if that was Mickey Rourke there? I mean, they're friends fighting. We know they're gonna make up. We know they're gonna figure things out. Why are we spending so much time seeing them fight at a party? Remember how Stark upgraded Pepper Potts to run the company? She doesn't like it. She turns it down after a while. Okay, well, what was the point of that then? There's a lot of time dedicated to Tony and remembering his father and what a jerk he was, only to figure out he wasn't really that much of a jerk. Okay, what did that add? Tony still acts like a jerk, and not the fun kind of jerk, just a jerk. He gets drunk and keeps telling everybody that despite what they think, he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't. He clearly doesn't know what he's doing, and it's not fun to watch. In the first film, he did jerky things, but he still came around to using his brilliant mind. He utilized stuff. He was resourceful. Here, all the times he reassures people that he knows what he's doing, it never comes back into play. Thank God they tackle Black Widow a lot better in the future because she's kind of a wasted character here. So yeah, the film does have a lot of problems and in the end probably doesn't really work. But the strength of it does still come from the cool stuff that we like to see in an Iron Man movie. We like to see the technology, we like to see the one-liners, and again, we like to see Robert Downey Jr. doing the role that redefined him. Even when he's being such a pain in the ass, he is still so funny and so enjoyable to watch. Which is why it's such a letdown when you find out that he actually doesn't know as much as he's letting on, and that he is just getting drunk and acting like an ass. So I don't know, I guess it's bad, but I still think there's some really neat things in there that haven't been done yet. Like tackling the celebrity of a superhero who revealed himself, the technology is upped a little bit, and yeah, you do kind of see Iron Man doing the typical Iron Man stuff, there's just not as much as you would like. In the end, it just kind of feels like a distraction to introduce a few other elements in between Marvel movies. I guess I feel a little bad for it because everybody praised what a masterpiece the first movie was, and yeah, it's good, it's well done, but it had problems too. And everyone seems to forget that when they look at this one. It doesn't work as a whole, but I don't think it's as bad as everybody else builds it up to be. And I guess we kinda know that there's more Iron Man movies on the way anyway, so it's not like this is the last one we would ever see. Now, how would that one fare up? Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. But for this one, it's probably the perfect definition of close, but no explosion. So out of all the Marvel superheroes that were gonna get their movies, the one I was probably the most concerned about was Thor. Because with all the other superheroes, it kinda made sense. They get superpowers, or they're based on technology, or they create stuff. Thor was a god. How do you do that? And on top of that, his design was always kind of weird. He had a helmet with these weird wings on it, and I just remember thinking to myself, oh man, this is gonna be the one. This is the one that people are just gonna roll their eyes at and say, sorry Marvel, we can't do this, it's just too goofy. But they made the very clever choice of assigning Kenneth Branagh to direct it. Now this is a guy that hasn't really done any superhero movies, and to be fair, he can be kind of hit and miss, but he's got mad talent, and everything he does is huge. And this movie is no exception. This is a gigantic looking film. Suddenly the idea of Marvel telling the story of a god sounds unbelievable. Look at Thor, he looks amazing. Look at Odin, he looks amazing. Look at this environment, it's friggin' phenomenal. Which is why it's really ironic that the least impressive part of this movie is what Marvel usually does well, the interaction with the real world. Yep, they just decide to make this a fish out of water story, with Thor pissing off his father Odin and Odin banishing him to the world of Earth, taking away his powers. He spends his time befriending a group of scientists, one of them played by Natalie Portman, learning how to be a true humble hero, and figuring out how to get back to stop his sinister brother Loki from taking over the throne. So on the one hand, you might think the stuff where he goes to Earth is beyond painful, and to its credit, it's not. Is it good? Well, I don't know if I can say that. But much like Iron Man, a lot of the likability comes from the charm of the main actor. Chris Hemsworth is a perfect Thor. He can be cocky, but likably naive. He has a lot of anger, but you know deep down he's a gentle guy. And most importantly of all, he adapts. I'm so sick of these movies where the fish out of water just stays stubborn and never wants to change anything. But this guy, he's a warrior, he's fought in battles. So when he throws a cup of coffee on the ground demanding more and they tell him that's not how we do things here, he doesn't demand an explanation or act like a spoiled brat, he says, okay. This is what makes the movie work. He actually evolves, he actually changes. Because of this, we can stomach a lot more of the traditional stuff. Which, with that being said, it is pretty traditional. The love interests and side characters on Earth are not very interesting, the battle scenes are kinda standard. And yeah, was this the best story you could have done with the idea of Thor? Probably not. But luckily, they do often come back to the world of the gods, and every time it does, it looks amazing. You feel the gigantic size and weight of this again, even though it never loses track that it's still a comic book movie. In my opinion, maybe one of the greatest looking comic book movies ever. Does the story make a whole lot of sense? Not particularly. Is it especially engaging? No, there's nothing really that new. But the way it's acted and the way it's shown makes it a lot of fun. I wish they didn't have to do this story where he travels to Earth, but it's passable. And anytime it's not on Earth, it's really friggin' cool. We do get a few battles in this realm, and we do feel this frustration between the brothers Loki and Thor. And though maybe kind of awkwardly and over time, Loki does become a pretty good villain. I guess you could still look at all this and say it's still pretty silly, but it's just so epically silly. I love how seriously everybody is taking this. Look at the expressions on their faces, look at these visuals. This looks like something out of some grand mythology. So I guess the best way I can describe it is, if you want to see Thor being Thor, you'll get it. You just gotta wade through some predictable standard stuff. But as that predictable standard stuff goes, it's not as bad as you would think. Is it needed? Probably not, but again, remembering the time period this came out, it's not like everybody was just ready to accept a Thor movie. This was probably the best compromise you could get at the time. The grand stuff is still grand and it sucks me into its world. Do I wish there was more of it? Hell yeah, but for what I got, I really enjoyed it. Yes, I could have used more action and even more exploration of these worlds, but for what I thought I was gonna get, I was thoroughly impressed. Not the best by any means, but impressive enough for me. Well, if there was any Marvel character I was more afraid not to take seriously than Thor, it would definitely be Captain America. Not only was his design so silly with the bright blue, the giant bullseye, and the little wings on the side of his head, but there was already a movie made in the 80s that looked like it was made in the 70s that, big shock, was not very good. In fact, there's even a Nostalgia Critic review of it. So once again, I was a little hesitant to see what they were gonna do with this. But luckily, once again, they turned out a pretty good product. Captain America starts off as a wimpy little soldier, conveyed through some pretty impressive computer-generated effects. Not to say it's flawless, but you gotta look really hard to notice. His goodwill and courage convinces everybody that he'd be perfect for a new experiment. One that could lead to a league of superhumans that could stop Hitler and his Nazi thugs. He agrees to the experiment and gets turned into a beefcake. But the scientist is killed, thus he's the only super soldier there is. One of the problems though is that nobody knows what to do with him. He's seen as a hero to many, so rather than actually put him in combat, they just kind of put him in advertisements. Big shows, dance numbers, all sorts of good stuff promoting the good of the war, but he's not really doing that many heroics. Finally they agree to send him into combat and he does a great job. That is until he comes across the evil Red Skull, played by Hugo Weaving. Through action, adventures, stunts, and all sorts of great effects, Captain America fights off Nazis and saves the day more times than you can count. Again, not having read that much Captain America, I didn't really know what to expect from this film. And I also wasn't really sure if this was gonna catch on in a market where we like things that are new and current, and this takes place back in the 40s. But through some good writing, some fun stunts, and again, some very likable actors, this movie turns out to be a good adventure. Yeah, I use the word adventure, it's not really as much of an action movie. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of fist fights and great stunts, but I don't know, maybe the 40s setting makes me think a little bit more of like Errol Flynn and flying planes and spinning around. Adventure just feels like the more proper word. The director of this movie also directed The Rocketeer, and it really shows. This guy knows how to make the time period look good. They also both star very similar main characters who are not dull, but not the most interesting either. But they're good. They're sort of the typical hero you would see in the 40s. Very simple, but very likable. Naive, but always looking to do good. Even some of the typical cliches are played with a little bit. Like there's a scene where this guy grabs this kid and he throws him in the water trying to escape. He's about to jump in and save the kid, but the kid says, "No, go after him, I can swim." God, isn't that refreshing? The Marvel movies really do seem to have this great technique of taking cliches that exist and either playing with them or only taking the best aspects of them. The ones most people are tired of, they kinda say, yeah, we're not doing that. We know you don't like them and we know you think they're boring, so we're only gonna stick to the ones that are classic for a reason. And this one does have a lot of the classics. The bad guy with the disfigured face, the triumphant symbols of America everywhere, the heroic stunts, the mad scientists, all that good stuff. It's lighthearted, but it doesn't steer away from some heavier moments either. When somebody dies, it really feels like they die. And when some characters are separated by a long distance or even time, you do feel legitimately bad. If I do have one major criticism of the movie, it's with the villain. I know it sounds strange, but this is the one thing the 80s film actually did better. That is, when they actually showed him. Through most of the original film, they couldn't show the Red Skull and he looked pretty ridiculous, but when they did show him, he looked fleshy, he looked creepy, he had these beady eyes, he had this great voice. Hugo Weaving is fine when he just looks like a human, but then when he rips off the mask and shows his real face, it looks pretty lame. It just looks like a plastic mask where the other one looked really juicy. The villain as well is kind of a little dull. Not that I remember him being like really annoying or stupid or anything, I just don't remember that much about him. That does seem to be the one weakness of the Marvel films is, while they do a great job portraying the heroes, they don't usually portray the villains that interestingly. I remember Red Skull was a big bad guy, like this was a really intimidating villain. He was the one Captain America always fought. Here, he's just kinda like any bad guy you see in any other movie. Not insultingly bad or anything, just kinda standard. And part of a hero's journey is how intimidating the threat is that he's going up against. So if the threat isn't that intimidating, you don't get as invested. But like I said, he's not horrible, just not anything that great. But honestly, much like Thor, this was a film I didn't think they could really do. I didn't think anybody could take Captain America seriously, but watching it, I actually found myself doing okay. It was clever that they just painted the wings on the side of his helmet. It was clever the changes that they made to his outfit. And it's even more clever that in future movies they would update the outfit to fit the rest of the Avengers. This is a Marvel movie that you can tell is kind of a segue, but unlike Iron Man 2, it feels more natural. It stands on its own as a good movie. It has a good beginning, middle, and end. It has a good journey. It has good character arcs. It has good concerns. If the villain was a little stronger, it probably would have stood out a little bit more, but as is, I was once again really impressed. I wanted to know what was going to happen to Captain America next after the credits rolled. At this point, I was finally realizing Marvel is really making traditional comic book movies work. They didn't have to pretend to be anything else or talk down to you or hide behind anything. With just a few cleverly planned out updates, they were making comic book movies that comic book fans have always wanted to see. And even better yet, they were giving a wider audience comic book films that they didn't even know they wanted to see. These films were showing why these stories were successful, why people got into them, why they were worth making movies about. Again, I'm not gonna act like this was the greatest one or anything, but it is the point where I realized if you truly embrace a world and an environment, you don't need to make as many changes as you thought. And with the end credits advertising that the next big movie was gonna be the Avengers, the ultimate cement of Marvel's staying power was about to take place. So after years and years of build-up, all the hype has finally come to this, the Avengers. There has never been a movie quite like this done before. 6 previous films starring individual superheroes that were all coming together for one event that was planned from the very beginning. Though you could look at them as individual stories, they were all leading up to one grand event. This was the event. Now don't get me wrong, there have been crossovers before, but nothing like this, and nothing this well thought out. So there was a little bit of a concern. Would it pay off? This would definitely have a good opening weekend no matter what, it's been built up so much, but would it be the gigantic hit everybody wanted? Would it be as good as the other Marvel movies, or, as promised, even better, 10 times better, something spectacularly huge? Well, the short answer is yes. Not only was this film a mega hit, but both critics and audiences alike agree it was a ton of fun and worth the wait. The movie centers around the return of the sinister Loki. He apparently is in cahoots with an evil force in space who wants to, what else, take over the world, of course. He plans to do so using a magic scepter to hypnotize people, and a gigantic alien army to open up a dimension and bring him into our world, enslaving mankind. Who can stop them? The Avengers, of course. Most of them just having come off hit movies. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and even the Hulk, played this time by Mark Ruffalo. But also included are characters we haven't seen that much of, like Black Widow and Hawkeye. And the film, literally from this point on, is nothing but one-liners and action. And I know it sounds strange, but it's actually kind of perfect. When you see these characters together, a lot of them with big personalities, just having come off of big movies, what do you want to see? You want to see them interact. That includes working off of each other, talking to each other, getting in fights, throwing insults. And because these actors and characters are so strong and so defined, it really works. The whole movie could be all of them just stuck in a room shooting the shit, and you know what? It'd be okay. They're that interesting and that much fun to watch. But of course, that's not what people are paying to see. They're paying to see action. And when the action gets going, it's some of the most fun I've seen an audience have in a movie theater. Every superhero has a unique way of fighting a villain, and each one has a different personality trait to make it interesting. Well, for the most part, we don't really know Hawkeye yet, but we're not Avengers 2 yet, give it time. A lot of these movies, as I mentioned before, deliver a lot of character, but sometimes skimp a little bit on the action, particularly in the climax. The great thing about this movie is that it makes you think it's about to end. They do the big team shot, you think, all right, well, they're just gonna punch out a few more and then we're gonna stop. But nope, it's just beginning. They spend a lot of time fighting creatures in the city, and unlike Transformers, you don't get tired of it. It gives you the exact amount you want to see. Every superhero does what you want to see the superheroes do. The Hulk jumps around and smashes things. He punches this giant whale, I don't know what is. Captain America's throwing his shield, Iron Man's flying around shooting stuff. Even Black Widow, who we didn't see that much before this movie, suddenly becomes this really cool character. She actually might be my favorite out of all of them. And yeah, I'm waiting for that damn movie too. The one element of the film that is kinda lazy is the story, but to its credit, story is not what you want to focus on here. This is the first time you've seen all these characters come together, and you just want to see them be those characters and beat shit up. So the story is very minimal. Hell, it doesn't even really make that much sense. Loki wants to get all the Avengers together knowing they won't get along and that would somehow destroy them. Okay. Well, as Tony Stark himself said, not a great plan. The whole story is kind of like that. There's all these weird little conveniences that don't really add up and are kind of confusing, but really, you don't care. You're there to see the Avengers fly around and be the Avengers, and this movie gives you that in bucket loads. They have been hyping this thing up forever. One of the biggest Marvel teams of all time actually comes to the big screen and it delivers. Does it have that much drama? No. Is there that much thinking in it? Absolutely not. But it's just an incredibly fun, dumb summer film. This is the kind of movie you want to see kind of mindless. You want to see a lot of dumb explosions. But it's done with so much wit and humor that you find yourself enjoying even the silliest moments. It's nice to see a cinematic gamble like this pay off, and for the right reasons. If we just started off with this movie before Iron Man, Captain America, and all the other films, it wouldn't be as good. It'd be impressive, but it'd just be too jumbled because you wouldn't have all the characters defined. Well, now that we do know all these characters and we enjoy them, and they've certainly proven themselves to be entertaining, they come together beautifully. I even kind of find myself enjoying Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. I'll admit I like Edward Norton just a little bit more because I think he's such an engaging actor, but I like the take he does. He plays it as a guy who's been spending years trying to achieve inner calm. So he kinda looks half awake sometime, but it's actually intentional. It doesn't seem lazy at all. It seems like a guy who's just trying to keep his rage under control because he knows what'll happen with it. And so he sacrifices some of his stronger emotions to keep everything balanced. It would have been cool to see Norton, but this guy's a good replacement. What else can I say? It's The Avengers, one of the highest grossing films of all time, one of the most hyped up films of all time, and it gave you exactly what you wanted. It's silly, it's funny, it's over the top, it's a comic book movie. At no part in it can you say it's not a comic book movie, it just drenches itself in it. And after years and years these were seen as embarrassing films to make, now they completely won us over. And everybody is trying to do exactly what the Avengers did. Create a movie universe, something that can continue and all these other characters can interact with each other and come in and different ideas. They can all try it and some even succeed, but none of us will forget who did it first. Why? Because it was just so damn fun. Iron Man 3, a film everyone agrees is better than the last one, and that's about it. People are split about whether or not this is actually a really good, entertaining film, but once again, it almost doesn't matter because it stars the person you all come to see, Robert Downey Jr. I'm beginning to think you can put this guy as Tony Stark in Batman and Robin, and he would somehow still make it work. But with that aside, does the film actually work as a whole? Well, it depends on the point of view you're coming from. Okay, so Tony Stark is back in his hometown after the events of the Avengers. One major downside though is that now he's getting panic attacks. Yeah, kind of out of nowhere, they try to explain it, that yeah, if you go through this you might get panic attacks too, but I don't know, isn't that a little strange that Tony Stark is getting this? I mean, this is a guy that survived terrorist attacks, he had to replace his heart with this metal light thingy. I know they're trying to add this layer of realism, but that seems a little odd. But whatever, he's being threatened by the terrible Mandarin, the leader of a terrorist organization that vows to take him down. After nearly killing his bodyguard, Tony Stark swears to go after the Mandarin and does the incredibly foolish thing of giving him his home address on public TV for all the world to see, with no plan after that. And, big friggin' shock, the Mandarin comes after him and blows the house up. This may be the single dumbest thing a superhero has ever done. There's other good things in the movie, I'm gonna get to it, but I just want to go on record saying that is probably the stupidest thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Tony is separated from the world and befriends a small child who tries to get him back on his feet. Along the way, discoveries are made, secret plans are revealed, and of course, even more action and crazy technology starts to get going. Okay, so let's once again talk about the good stuff. The action in both Iron Man movies seemed very minimal and didn't always play that much to the strength of the plot. Here, it's a lot better. There's not only a wide variety of different action scenes going on, but they're incredibly creative, incredibly funny, and don't seem pointless. Each one advances the story somehow. It's also nice to see that things are kind of stepping up in size. I mean, this is a movie that's coming off of the Avengers, so they know they gotta step up their game a bit, and yeah, they kind of do. There's a lot of suits all over the place, his house is blown up, he has to travel alone, he has to start from scratch again. But it isn't just a retread of the first movie either, where he's captured by a terrorist. It's a different kind of being alone. Even the idea of a child finding a superhero and trying to help him out, that could have so easily been terrible, but they got a good child actor and they wrote him pretty decently, and they spent just the right amount of time on him. You think he's gonna follow Iron Man throughout the entire film and get captured and he needs to save him, but no, he's in the exact amount of time he needs to be in it. But yeah, let's get to the bad stuff. Besides from, like I said, the dumbest move ever done in a Marvel movie, there's this great excitement to see Ben Kingsley as this terrorist fellow, this Mandarin guy. Now, in the comic, he's an alien, and yeah, I guess you can't really do that here, or could you? I don't know. With the Avengers, they kind of got away with it okay, but whatever. I didn't read the comics, so I'm not gonna be a purist. However, without giving too much away, what they do to this character is gonna piss off a lot of people. This is like the dance in Spider-Man 3 or what they did to Deadpool and Wolverine. This is a complete slap in the face to a character. But with that said, it is funny. It was a legitimate twist I didn't see coming, and it did actually get a few laughs out of me. But again, is that what people are looking for? Probably not. Even though I didn't read the comic, I as well wanted to see the awesome Ben Kingsley go up against the awesome Robert Downey Jr., but instead, who do we get? Some asshole in a suit again! Oh my god, why do these guys keep popping up? Nobody cares if he wrongs someone out of a business or something. It's a comic book movie. Give us comic book villains. Every time you always have in these Iron Man movies, they're either embarrassing, out too early, or embarrassing again. It's kind of like watching a Batman movie where he's fighting the Joker and then halfway through you find out, oh, the Joker was just a hologram. The real mastermind is this guy who wants to get you for tax fraud or something. Who gives a shit? We want to see a comic book movie, especially after one that celebrated what a comic book movie it was with the Avengers. So once again, we're stuck with kind of a half and half movie. On the one hand, the action is good and is visually interesting, and there's some fun ideas, and Tony Stark is still really funny, and they're evolving him a little bit more. But on the other hand, some of these choices are just so bizarre and so strange and just downright dumb. I get the idea behind Tony Stark. He's sort of this tortured genius who has a lot of brilliance but not a lot of wisdom. But come on, some of these moves are just downright stupid. For my money, I'm still glad I saw it. Again, is it technically a good film? Kinda hard to say. I mean, you still get the Iron Man-y stuff you want to see, just a bunch of technology and action and smart-ass lines. But yeah, it is a little weird that the best of the Iron Man movies is the original, and even that had kind of a slow, silly second half. So yeah, I'm glad I saw it. I just wanted to see Iron Man do what Iron Man does, and I was fine with it. But any die-hard fans that are looking for that big Iron Man movie, like the big mano-y-mano fight and such, are probably gonna be disappointed when they see what it's building up to. If you're just a typical moviegoer looking for a typical action film, this one's a lot of fun. But if you're looking for the evolution of a character or a story, you, like this movie, will probably have to take a step back. So, like most people, I wanted to see a Thor movie that took place in his home turf. No fish out of water stuff, no trying to blend in with any funny lines, just Thor being Thor. But after watching Thor: The Dark World, I might find myself going back on that remark. I know I'm kind of an outsider on this, but I'm sorry, I did not see this as a very good film. It just kind of felt like in-between pointless exposition on a character that really could be a lot of fun to explore, in an environment that could be a lot of fun to explore. And when we do finally explore it, it's just kind of dull looking. Really? This is the Dark World? The Dark World is fucking boring. Really? This is our bad guy who's going to replace Loki? Really? We have this dumbass comic relief again? Okay, let me start from the beginning. Some evil jerk who looks like a reject from the new Star Trek movies is trying to capture the Infinity Stones. What are the Infinity Stones? Oh god, I don't want to explain. Just powerful things, that's all you need to know. And it's up to Thor to stop him from getting this stone and, of course, conquering Earth. Natalie Portman is once again roped in, and sadly she gets way too much screen time. More than actually his other warrior friends have. Which is really not fair. I like these warrior friends. I think we need more of them, but instead, not only do we get a ton of Natalie Portman, but Kat Dennings. Good fucking god, do I hate Kat Dennings in this movie. I didn't like her in the first one, but at least Thor was on screen. We could see them sort of interact, and if she said something stupid, whatever, Thor's there and he's charming and cool. Here, every time she's on screen, she's either alone or with her scientist friends, and she is so beyond annoying. Like, remember in Star Wars where the comedy kind of came from the interaction off of people, like the way Luke Skywalker worked off of Han Solo, and he worked off of Chewie, and Chewie worked off of C-3PO and stuff? It was the interaction. This is the Jar Jar Binks of the Star Wars movies. All the comedy is just put into one person. And just like Binks, she's not funny. Hell, the film opens up with a scientist running around nude. Yeah, they create some sort of bullshit explanation for it, but it's entirely pointless. You don't need it. The comedy is beyond desperate in this. Every line that is trying to be funny, unless it's said from Loki, is painful. Beyond painful. But that's not the only bad thing about it. Remember how grand and huge the worlds looked in the first Thor? Here, they look nice, at least the palace. But aside from that, it's just kind of typical fantasy stuff that you'd see anywhere. Again, look at this dark world. The movie is named after this, and it is so incredibly not interesting. There's a major character who dies in this movie. I remember thinking to myself, God, I should be a lot more invested in this. And I guess I felt bad seeing Thor's reaction to it, but I personally didn't miss the character that much because they just didn't make that person that interesting. Nobody is that interesting in this movie. The villain? What a yawn. The scheme? Seen it a million times. The only thing that's kind of enjoyable is when Thor has to team up with Loki again. This is as great as it sounds. You like seeing these two together. You like seeing them work off each other. But what do? Halfway through the movie, they get rid of that idea. And they don't even really start that until the end of the first third. So that's 1/3 of the movie. Hell, less than 1/3. If this was the prime focus, maybe it would have been a lot more fun. But nope, we gotta make room for Natalie Portman and Kat Dennings saying all their stupid, unfunny stuff that nobody wants to see. The movie gives you no time to really settle down and feel like you can get attached to these characters, which is so weird because there's a whole movie dedicated to them that did so well at doing that. Everybody talks like they just kind of want to get the story going. Nobody really relates to each other. Again, with the exception of Loki, but that's in the movie so little it can't really save it. I guess the only other thing that's kind of enjoyable is that the climax does have some creative ideas. It's this device that's kind of like a portal gun in that you can go through a hole and come out another area and it can zap you in all sorts of different places, and yeah, they do some cool things with it. But again, did I really care if Thor stopped this guy? Did I really care if he succeeded in his quest? I didn't give a shit. As dumb a setup as the first film was, at least I cared for those people. At least I wanted to see Thor get back home. I don't know, this isn't the worst movie by any means, but it's the time that I felt we could really see Thor being Thor, going out into the fields or traveling through the stars or going to other worlds, just swinging that hammer, doing the cool stuff. Once again, I could see those operatic landscapes really taken advantage of. But instead of feeling like a really grand big comic book, it just kind of feels like a very dull standard comic book. But like I said, I know I'm in a minority and a lot of people really like this film. I don't get it, and there's certainly nothing in it that's straight up offensive, again outside of maybe Kat Dennings, and weird naked scientists running around for no reason. But in my opinion, I'd rather save my money for Avengers 2. So I'm just gonna take a wild guess and say the comments in the last video I did, Thor the Dark World, are probably not very positive. I'm also gonna take a guess that people are gonna say, well, what did you want? What were you actually looking for? Captain America the Winter Soldier is what I was looking for. This is a sequel that had a previous film that was good and did a lot more with its premise than anybody would probably give him credit for. And the sequel dives even further into it. It takes the drama, it takes the characters, it takes the story, and it ups it to 10. When this film came out, nobody was expecting much. Yeah, it looked like it'd be fun. Okay, let's go in, see Captain America kind of do his thing, you know, it's not Avengers, but I'm sure it'll be good. Everyone was blown away by how much work and effort went into this one. The development, the twists and turns, the action, holy smokes, this is actually a great comic book movie. Captain America returns in modern-day Washington, D.C., where he finds he's still having trouble fitting in, but not in the ways that you'd think. It's not the tee-hee-ha-ha, what's this thing I don't recognize, it's him trying to deal with the fact that a lot of the people he knew are gone. It actually opens with him visiting his old girlfriend who's mentally and physically fading away. And you know what? It's kind of a tearjerker. This is a woman who was really likable in the first film, has her own show right now, and then suddenly to see her like this, it's sad. You really friggin' feel something for this. But that's not where it stops. S.H.I.E.L.D., it looks like, is being taken over by the same people that tried to stop Captain America in the first film. Nick Fury is dead and the captain is told not to trust anybody, so he goes rogue. He gets a few people to join him, including Black Widow, and it's a chase to not only outrun S.H.I.E.L.D., but also stop that evil organization, now known famously as Hydra, while also trying to figure out the story behind their newest weapon, the Winter Soldier. I think most of the people know what the story is behind this guy, but I'm not gonna ruin it. Okay, so this is about as standard a filler in-between plot that you can get. The idea of being chased down by the people you work for is recycled. The evil organization from the first film, literally recycled. A lot of these characters you've seen before, some from their own TV show, yeah, this seems about as recycled as you can get. But again, in this movie, it's not the subject, it's the delivery. The atmosphere and the pacing is so good that whenever there's a new twist or turn, it feels like a big deal. You're surprisingly really invested in what's going on with a character that a lot of people found kind of uninteresting originally. Because it knows what to talk about to make him interesting. It talks about how he has a hard time fitting in. It talks about how he has a hard time figuring out who's on his side and who isn't. It takes the fact that he is such a Boy Scout to its advantage. Because he likes working for people and he likes doing good, the idea that he hasn't been doing good or is going to continue not to do good is something that would make him feel really bad, and you would feel the turmoil in that. He's fighting for something you know he would fight for, and hey, you would probably fight for too. There's a scene with Gary Shandling that's actually a creepy scene. Yeah, a creepy scene with Gary Shandling. Somehow this movie made that work. And when you do find out who the Winter Soldier is, it creates a lot of emotional baggage. It's interesting because you feel their connection. And that's what this movie does. It takes all this standard stuff and you feel for it. They know the right elements to focus on. They know where to put the emphasis. It's also nice to see Black Widow and Captain America working as a team. Yeah, she still hasn't gotten her own movie, and clearly she deserves it, but if we're not gonna get it anytime soon, the more we can see of her, the better. And she's great, as always. If I did have one nitpick, and it really is a nitpick, I'd say I could have used a little bit more with the Winter Soldier. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but I think because the rest of the film was so strong and I was so invested, I wanted a little bit more of a rivalry there. Now, you do care, but not as much you do a rivalry between someone like Batman and the Joker, or Superman and Lex Luthor. And I know, those are different kind of relationships, but those also made the films feel so much bigger, and I wanted it to feel as big as possible because, hey, it kinda got on the right step. This could be one of the great big grand comic book movies. But I think because the relationship can't be delved with too much because of all the other things going on, it sorta holds back a little bit from that. But again, it's a super big nitpick. Everything else in this movie is really, really solid. I'm actually amazed at how good they made this. It clearly was just supposed to be a filler film, but they did their damnedest to make it as amazing as possible. This is taking the idea of a superhero and developing him even more, even one that a lot of people didn't find that fascinating. It took something standard and it made it intriguing. That's what a good sequel is supposed to do. Good action, good story, good characters, it hits everything. Suit up, because it's one hell of a ride. It's funny, the films I thought would probably be Marvel's failures, Thor and Captain America, everyone kinda knew were gonna be okay. And they were right. However, for me, the film I thought would be okay, but everyone thought was gonna be a failure, was Guardians of the Galaxy. I guess I can kinda see where they're coming from. This is a weird setup. We go from superheroes and super gods to intergalactic fugitives, one being a tree and one being a raccoon with a machine gun. Yeah, it's pretty silly. But I guess I knew it'd be okay because it kind of embraced its insanity. The marketing said everything. This is not meant to be taken that seriously. It's a raccoon who swears. It's a tree that can only say 3 words. It's a giant gray guy who literally doesn't know what sarcasm is. It's the chubby dude from Parks and Recreation suddenly made to look like a beefcake. This is gonna have a good sense of humor. And it did, and people seem to love it. Though from the beginning, you might think something else. It starts off with our hero named Star-Lord watching his mother die from cancer. She asks him to take his hand, he's too afraid, doesn't grab it, and she dies. He runs out into the field screaming because he lost his mother and suddenly he's abducted by aliens. That sounds like a totally insane opening, and it is, but it's a totally insane film. Years later, he grows up and finds himself living among the aliens as a bounty hunter, treasure hunter, pretty much anything hunter that's usually illegal. But he gets mixed in with a plot from another boring bad guy you won't remember. God, is Loki really your best villain? Why is Marvel so bad at these? And he teams up with a group of outlaws to try and stop it. Nobody was demanding to see this movie on the big screen. Hell, nobody even really knew that much about these characters. But that's sort of what made it so interesting and new. We didn't know these people. We weren't gonna get upset if they weren't represented a certain way, and nobody really had high standards because who the hell's reading a comic about a raccoon with a machine gun? Actually, the real question is, why weren't we reading a comic about a raccoon with a machine gun? But nevertheless, when the movie came out, everyone went nuts. It was one of the biggest hits of the summer and everybody adored it. And yeah, I like it too. Did I love it? I don't know if I can say that. I like a lot of the other Marvel movies more, but I think because people's standards were set so low, they were surprised they enjoyed it as much as they did. For me, I thought it was a lot of fun, and funny, but I don't know if I see it as quite the big masterpiece that a lot of other people are seeing it as. The plot, once again, is obviously a filler plot. It's talking about the Infinity Stones, it has a throwaway villain, there's a bunch of characters that we're gonna see later. Oh hey, there's Thanos and he still does nothing. But big whoop, maybe it's like Winter Soldier and it just does it so well. Well, it does it okay. Again, this is supposed to be a comedy, so it's a different kind of movie. And it does have more sentimental scenes, but they kinda come out of nowhere. Maybe that's the one issue with the movie is the pacing. Not that it's too fast or too slow, they just don't always segue into each other very well. There's a really nice scene where Groot lights up this room with all these little lights, but it's suddenly an emotional scene in this really big action-packed moment, and it just sort of comes in and leaves too fast. There's another scene where the raccoon is drunk and suddenly starts a fight and we go into a little bit of his backstory, and again, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. They're nice scenes, they just don't always fit in. I'm also not sure why they never made this green lady that funny. Everybody has their own little weird quirk, but she's the only one that doesn't really seem to have anything that funny about her. You could make the argument that she's the sourpuss who's grounded, but we kinda have this big gray guy for that. Well, maybe she's the more emotional center. Well, no, we kinda got Star-Lord for that, so yeah, even though she looks kinda cool, I didn't entirely see the purpose of her. I would've liked something a little extra to make her feel like she's more part of the team. But again, that's kind of a nitpick in what's obviously supposed to be a silly movie, and as silly movies go, I don't know what else to really say about it. It's good. It has good effects, it has good acting, it takes itself seriously at the right moments, and goes for the all-out laughs in other moments. Is it clumsy at times? Yeah, but look at it, it's a raccoon and a tree. I'm surprised we got any of this out of that. I'll admit I don't think I loved it as much as everyone else did, but I thought it was really enjoyable. As goofy intergalactic comedies with a lot of action go, this one's pretty good. It's creative, it's weird, it's goofy, and it's got a lot of punches and explosions. Grab the next ship to the stars and see for yourself. It's the sequel everyone was waiting for literally since the end credits of the last one, Avengers: The Age of Ultron. After one of the most hyped up and biggest blockbusters of all time came out, everyone was waiting what the second one was gonna be. Was it gonna be bigger? Was it gonna be better? Was it gonna be funnier? In some respects, yeah, it is all those things. In other respects, it's kinda hard to keep the wow factor going after such a groundbreaking last one. Does that make it bad? No. Does that make it better than the first one? It's complicated. Okay, let's look at the setup. The Avengers assemble once again in order to get Loki's scepter. They didn't meet up for all those other times the world was about to be destroyed. It's a comic book, don't think about it. But Tony Stark's mind is manipulated by another character called Scarlet Witch, who makes him see a destroyed future that apparently he's responsible for. Like an idiot, he reads it as, I didn't do enough, so he creates this computer that's apparently gonna create peace in our time. Oh, come on. He didn't think that maybe this is what would cause all those terrible things to happen? Because, you know, the audience is 10 steps ahead of him on that. But whatever, he creates this computer program known as Ultron. Ultron, of course, wants to create peace in his time, but in the way that he knows how, by getting rid of everyone. Oops, forgot to overlook that glitch. So now Ultron is trying to destroy the world by making tons of different versions of himself, trying to raise a giant city as a meteor and smash it into the world. And the Avengers have to overcome their new mental problems as well as new physical problems in order to stop him. So yeah, pretty weak plot, but again, the first film had a pretty weak plot too, and that didn't matter. We just wanted to see the Avengers get together and fight and work off each other and say those great one-liners. And in Avengers 2, we get all that. Plus more, actually. There's a wonderful scene where they've all been mentally ripped apart and so they go to this cabin to try and get away. It's easily the best thing in the film because we haven't seen anything like that before. It felt like the Avengers were actually evolving as characters, and through a way that they haven't really done yet. So in some respects, it's exactly what we wanted, but in others, don't we want to see something we didn't know we wanted? Like that cabin scene? And don't get me wrong, I love that cabin scene, but why is there only one scene like this in the movie and not more? It's kind of weird because the film does kind of feel like it's on repeat. Here's all these action scenes, all these one-liners, and they're good, they're well done, there's nothing wrong with them, but there's nothing really new about them either. The wow factor from this is kind of gone because there aren't really any new Avengers for them to interact off of. I mean, okay, there's this Scarlet Witch and this fast guy, and they create this other one called the Vision, and at the end they're indicating that there's even more being added to the mix, but all these other characters had their own movies. Half of these people are being introduced in this film, and the other ones, they were just kind of side characters. We're not exactly excited to see them here. Now, they're not bad, but they're no Thor, Iron Man, or Captain America. There's also a totally out of nowhere romance between Black Widow and the Hulk, and it's good. Again, not bad, but I'm not exactly gonna lose sleep if I don't see them get together. But again, it is evolving the characters to a different place than when we started. I do feel I found out more about these people after watching this film than I did after watching the first Avengers. That's something that was really missing in the last movie. But with everything else, even if it's done good, the investment isn't quite as strong because we kinda seen this stuff before. A bad guy who doesn't see destroying the world as a bad thing and he tries to make up some philosophical bullshit about why it's not. People being hypnotized to do his will, the whole world about to be destroyed in one city. And again, I hate talking this way because it's done well. In many respects, it's done better than the first film, but it's not evolving anything that much. And don't get me wrong, the audience had a fun time with this. They were laughing, they were applauding, they were gasping, they were doing all the things that an audience is supposed to do. But when it was all said and done, there wasn't this standing ovation like there was at the first film. Because the first film gave us a lot of what we never saw and really wanted to see. This gave us what we thought we were going to see. So it's hard to say, because on the one hand, it is kind of better than the original. We do learn more about these people, there is that wonderful scene at the house. The action is upped, there are more one-liners, we do see a lot more of the Avengers together. Hell, there's literally one scene where they're just hanging out at a party. I could just watch this the whole entire time, they're so interesting. I guess the real problem is, it's not an experience. It's a sequel to an experience, trying to clearly be better, and in some cases it is, but because we've already seen a lot of this before, it's not as much blowing us away. but it's still a lot of fun. I definitely recommend it. Does it have stuff that doesn't make sense, and are there elements that are clearly filler for other movies? Sure, but so did the first one. I don't think this is the groundbreaking sequel they were hoping for, but at the same time, we didn't get a bad film, by any means. I think if they did want to blow us away, they would include a lot more, like why aren't the Guardians of the Galaxy in there? Why wasn't there a Spider-Man cameo? You just got him. Now don't get me wrong, these are all tie-ins that maybe I don't understand. I mean, the fact that any of this is happening in Hollywood is pretty amazing, so maybe they couldn't pull it off. But that's the reason people weren't as blown away. They wanted a lot more, and instead they got a little more. In many respects, I do like this more than the first one. Hell, I probably prefer watching this one to the first one. But it's not the groundbreaking follow-up that I think audiences, as well as the studio, was hoping for. But hell with what it is and concentrate on what it is. A lot of fun and really enjoyable. If you don't go in overhyped and just want to see the Avengers being the Avengers, this is definitely a fun one to check out. Assemble your team of friends and take a look. Following in the style of Guardians of the Galaxy, that is, taking something that seems totally ridiculous and making it awesome somehow, we have Ant-Man. Again, a seemingly stupid idea that anyone with half a brain would say would never sell, but you put some talented people, some great effects, some creative ideas, and you get a really fun superhero. Paul Rudd plays an ex-con who's just been let out of prison. He wants to be let back in his daughter's life, but mother sees him as exactly what he is, an ex-con. He tries to take the route of getting an honest job and standing upright, but his background is sadly not giving him enough credit. So, through the help of his friends, he tries to take on another con in order to get his life back on track. Yeah, you figure out the logic in that. But he gets caught by a scientist played by Michael Douglas, who's frustrated that his company is working on a weapon that he thought he got rid of years ago. A weapon that can shrink people down but still give them unbelievable strength. Afraid that this technology has fallen into the wrong hands, Douglas talks to Rudd about breaking in and getting the weapon to destroy it forever. Using what? The weapon, of course! A suit that shrinks him down but still gives him unbelievable powers. On top of that, he's also given a device that can control ants as well. It's about as adorably silly as it sounds. With the help of Douglas's daughter, played by Evangeline Lilly, it's a heist movie of both the largest and smallest of caliber. The reaction to this movie when it came out was pretty much the same. Everyone said it was good. Not great, but good. It's a movie that we've seen a million times, a heist film, all the superhero stuff, but it's done creatively and uniquely enough that people seem to like it fine. I think I liked it a little bit more than everyone else. I agree with what they're saying, that this has been done a million times and we see the superhero stuff all around, but I feel like there's more effort that was put into these characters than you see a lot of times in these kind of stories. This is a really good cast. They help breathe new life into a lot of these cliches that we've seen over and over, but they deliver it in their own unique and likable way. Even though I've heard this story about how Douglas doesn't want to lose his daughter and how Paul Rudd realizes that family is the most important and all this stuff, something about the way they say it and the way they do it, it feels like you're hearing it for the first time. I really appreciate actors that can pull that off. But on top of that, they take advantage of this situation. They make it fun, they make it visually interesting, and you really feel the size of this person. The idea of being shrunken down has been done a million times, and honestly, when I heard they were making a movie out of this, I was thinking, oh god, another Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, this is so done to death. But again, they add new elements on top of it. The fact that it is a super suit, the fact that he can get bigger and smaller whenever he wants. The fact that they can make anything they want bigger or smaller. They make keychains, toys, all sorts of various things gigantic, and it's great, it's wonderful to see. The climax actually takes place on a Thomas the Tank Engine railroad set. That's both really funny and really action-packed at the same time. Again, it's taking kind of a standard idea and it's adding a new spin to it. I love how Marvel can do that. It feels like no matter what subject matter they're doing or talking about, they can add something that's unique to it. Whether it be a writer or a style of acting or effects, they always add that element of cool. So I like this movie, actually even more than most people like it. Is it an action classic? No, and it's no kind of masterpiece, but I was invested from beginning to end, and I want to know what's going to happen in the sequels. The idea of this guy joining the Avengers sounds like a really good idea. I love to see how he interacts with everybody. Hell, I love to see how all these characters interact with the Avengers. Maybe that's how I judge a really good movie, that when it's done, I don't want to be done with it. I want to see even more with it. I want to see more explored. I want to see more of these characters. I want to see more of their interactions. I want to see more things get bigger and smaller. I want to see more of those creative action sequences. So I definitely had a lot of fun with it. Shrink yourself down and experience it for yourself. It's the real Avengers 2. I mean Captain America Civil War. Yeah, the real Avengers 2. Don't get me wrong, I like Avengers 2 fine, but this was the movie that really felt like it was pushing Marvel films to the next level. And it's literally just missing 2 Avengers. And it adds so many other characters that, just screw it, this is the real Avengers 2. Out of all the Marvel movies so far, I have to admit, this might be my favorite one. Marvel films, when they started out, were known for doing things very different, but after a while, they were starting to get kind of a repetition. People could recognize when they were building up another Marvel film, or when there was a joke that didn't need to have a joke. There was a little bit of a formula. But every once in a while, one comes along to push the envelope just a little bit more, and this one definitely does that. Captain America has a lot on his plate. Not only has he lost the love of his life to old age, man, that's gotta be a surreal thing to go through. But he's also trying to protect Bucky, the Winter Soldier, because he doesn't think he's really bad, he was just brainwashed, constantly deal with the government trying to tell him and his team what he can't and can't do, and even start butting heads with Tony Stark, who feels a great deal of guilt for the people that might have been killed in their battles. When more explosions and assassinations keep popping up around them though, a choice is made to finally stop the Avengers, but half of them don't want to, particularly Captain America. Mostly because the other half see Bucky as dangerous and should be turned in. So it's a battle of heroes and ideologies as the team is split and they constantly go against each other trying to get Bucky, as well as figure out who the real mastermind behind all of this is. Oh, and did I also mention Black Panther? Oh, and Spider-Man? Oh, and the death of Tony's mother? Oh, and like a billion other things going on in this movie that are so massive that the villain is actually just kind of a wormy guy, not even a big-time Marvel villain. In any other movie, this would be way too much, and I would be so pissed off that the Marvel villain is another letdown. But what makes this film so good is every character's motivation is completely understood. It's perfectly explained, it's perfectly talked about. When an action sequence starts, you don't say to yourself, why are we having this action sequence? You know exactly why. Every time there's a twist or a turn, it doesn't feel like it's just the movie trying to trick you, it feels like it's something else to motivate the characters more. Yes, there's a bad guy technically setting this up, but he's almost sidelined at the end. The real focus is these different heroes and their different ideologies, and you understand them both, relate with them both, and feel conflicted. You still love both of these sides. It's not like in Avengers 2 where you just say, what the hell is Tony Stark doing? He's being a jackass, or actually a lot of the other Iron Man movies, the more I think about it, you legitimately get where he's coming from. You get where all sides are coming from, because all the characters are perfectly established, charming, likable, distinct, and interesting. While there is a lot of talking and running around, there's also some incredible action sequences. The one at the airport, unbelievable. It was kind of like watching the climax in the first Avengers. It's one of those fights you never think you're gonna see on the big screen, at least not from Marvel comic books. You remember how big and epic they were when you were reading them, with also the funny one-liners and the distinct characters and the great action sequences, and here it is, on the big screen. These fights are so amazing. I'm always shocked after all these years how they can not only make these action sequences so creative and so good, but how the CG most of the time can look really good, and even when it doesn't, it's still so imaginative. These moves are so clever and fast, and what makes us on board with them is the fact that the characters are so clever and fast. If we just did this action sequence and none of them ever talked, it would fail. It would go on too long, it'd be boring. But because we do love these characters and we love the way they interact off each other, and it's interesting to see them fight one another, it's one of the great Marvel moments. In my opinion, it's one of the best Marvel movies, if not the best. I may still need a little time to look over all the Marvel movies and see where they're all going and what they do with them, but in terms of a Marvel movie that was deep, complex, action-packed, had great characters, had great laughs, kept me interested all the way through, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next, this is the movie that has everything. It's adult, it's childish, there's a lot of sitting around talking, there's a lot of running around fighting. It's funny, it's serious, it's uplifting, it's sad. It just has everything I would want from a really great comic book movie. So grab a shield or swing on in, because both sides are ready to give you one hell of a time. Well, you guys definitely let me know when I missed this one. Doctor Strange! This technically should have been in last year's Disneycember, but I just didn't really have the time or room to fit it in, and, well, I'm making up for it now, so here we go. Doctor Strange is definitely not a film to be ignored in the MCU, as visually it's amazing, its ideas are pretty cool too, even if the story is your typical Marvel Cinematic Universe story, as a lot of people have pointed out. Stephen Strange is one of the world's best neurosurgeons, but he's also cocky as hell. He throws himself more into his work than he does his friends, but one day he gets in an awful accident. His hands are destroyed and he can never operate again. I also think it did something to his American accent. It's a little wonky. Over time, though, he discovers a powerful being called the Ancient One, who knows how to alter reality, open parallel dimensions, different timelines, pretty much anything that can blow your mind. He has to train with her, but she refuses, thinking he's not ready yet. His persistence eventually pays off, though, and he's invited in to be trained. Over time, he learns not only how to heal himself, but also how to manipulate the world around him, open up different realms and universes, and even be introduced to new devices, including a cape that seems to have a mind of its own. But forgettable Marvel villain number Billion comes along and says that he wants the ultimate power for himself. He used to work with the Ancient One, but he stabs her in the back because he wants more of the secrets, more of the power, more of the usual bad guy stuff you expect from bad guys in the MCU. Can Doctor Strange stop him while also putting reality back to normal? Is there even a normal after everything he's discovered? Well, there must be, because this follows very by the numbers the Marvel formula. Now for some, that's gonna be a turnoff, because there's a ton of these Marvel movies, and they do follow kind of a formula, but for a lot of people, there's enough creativity and laughs and character and drama, and yeah, I mostly felt the same way, but the big tipping point for me was the visuals. I just never seen a Marvel film that looked this massive. This is like watching Inception just fold in on itself. I mean, okay, Inception already kind of did that, but if that was a fold, this is one of those paper things girls make to find out who has cooties. It's like someone took some mind-altering drugs and then was given a lot of money to bring it to the big screen, but as clear and solid as possible. If Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a bad trip, then Doctor Strange is definitely a good trip. So much so that, yeah, I do kind of wish these visuals and ideas were kind of put to something with a little more substance. Not to say there's no substance, I mean, they do have us care for the characters and their dilemmas, and the action is great, and I do like everybody. You know, aside from the stock villain again, but everyone else I do legit enjoy their connections and the creativity around their different styles. But I do kind of wish this was used for something a little bigger, like a Black Panther story or a Infinity War story, something like that. Regardless, as these superhero stories go, it is a fun one. It's action-packed, clever, funny, has its proper dramatic moments. But yes, it's the visual trip-out scenes that project it into something more unique. If you took them away, it'd probably just be your standard Marvel movie, but this really projects it into something different and new. In terms of story and character, Doctor Strange mostly plays it safe, but it plays it creatively safe. I can still watch these action sequences and be blown away every single time I watch them. The amount of time, effort, and technology that must have gone into it is just mind-blowing. So yeah, if you're looking for something that's new and groundbreaking in terms of telling a cinematic story or even a Marvel film, it's not exactly that. It's a basic, straightforward superhero flick. But if you're looking for that kind of flick with mind-blowing visuals and unbelievable imagination, then this is the Something Strange for you. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are interesting because everyone has that one that they absolutely adore and another one that they think is okay. Some adore the first one, think the sequel's okay, some adore the second and think the first one's okay. Me, I'm a Volume 2 kind of guy. I absolutely love this movie's sense of humor, its drama, its visuals, its effects, its characters, its pacing, its themes. I just fell in love with it. Our team of space outcasts are back fighting all sorts of monsters and weird creatures and always on the run, but when trying to find a place to hide out, they come across a celestial named Ego, played by Kurt Russell. Russell, it's revealed, is Star-Lord's father. Yeah, I guess you can't expect a guy like this to have normal parents. His abilities are pretty much that of a god. He can create worlds from nothing. He can also destroy them with nothing, which suggests a very large threat, but the guy seems pretty nice. He gives them all a place to stay, he's a jokester, he's kind, but part of these situations, something just doesn't seem right. Nobody can put their finger on it, but there just seems to be something a little off. Everybody except, of course, Star-Lord, who just loves that he's found his actual dad and he's discovering who he is, where he came from, and what he's gonna do next. But meanwhile, the guy who raised Star-Lord, Yondu, played again by Michael Rooker, is in the middle of a mutiny with his crew taking over his ship and even capturing Groot and Rocket. While they desperately try to escape and even form a little bit of a bond, Star-Lord desperately tries to form a bond and maybe thinks about trying to escape. It's one of those setups I love where you feel like a prisoner, but you can never actually say you are. You can go at any time. It doesn't seem like you're really being threatened, yet somehow it feels like you're being held against your will. Of course, secrets are discovered, betrayals are made, jokes are had, and giant intergalactic battles involving Pac-Man appear. Because that shit can work in a movie like this. What drew me the most to this film is not only that the sense of humor seemed to really be upped. I mean, the first film was very funny, but this one seemed especially funny. But the drama really seemed upped too. A lot of the movie is just kind of taking it easy in these incredible environments and really letting them sink in. I really like films where the visuals kind of tell you the story. The background is almost as big a character. One of my favorite scenes is a really quiet moment where Gamora is just sitting in this field and then suddenly the ship comes down and attacks and it's her sibling and they try shooting at each other and blowing each other up. But then they both kind of get tired, they talk with one another and they make amends like siblings do. It's crazy and over the top, yet somehow it feels kind of real. The emotions are all there and they don't need to be talked about, they just need to be explored. You can learn just as much about a character with a few choice words and just seeing them walk alone than you can with paragraphs and paragraphs of dialogue. With that said, there are a few things that don't quite add up. For example, I love Michael Rooker in this film. I mean, he's just a great character in this, but then there's kind of this connection that he was always his dad and he raised Star-Lord, but I don't know, the first film did not make that connection very strongly. I know they say like he was hard on him because he cared about him, but it feels like they're retconning the last film to kind of make this comparison work. But honestly, it's okay because it's done so well in this film. I love the way all these relations work off each other, and they're all so unique and they're so well defined. Where in the first movie, a lot of the drama seemed to just be at the beginning, a little bit in the middle, and then a little bit at the end, and they just kind of came out of nowhere. Here, it seems balanced perfectly. They can go from one funny moment to an incredibly heartbreaking moment in just a millisecond. That way, a gigantic battle between a father and son, god and human, can easily be interrupted by just showing Groot how to push a button. They both work, match up beautifully, and you care for everybody. Even the ending scene, which I won't give away, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little teary-eyed at. Somehow this movie was working its magic without me even realizing it, to a point where when a character disappeared, I felt really bad. I felt as emotional as the characters in the film did. And a lot of that is because we do like these characters, and we do understand where they're coming from, and they're strange, and they're weird, and they're outcasts, and they're goofy, but we can relate to all of it. If I have one gripe, it's that the ending does go on a little too long, and maybe they're making up for the fact that a lot of the action was saved for the end, and there's only bits and pieces in the rest of the film. Like I said, it is a lot of walking around and talking. So I guess they felt they had to make up for lost punching time and just throw it all in the third act. But still, that action is amazing, and it's so incredible to watch, and you're 100% on the character's side. You want to see them work through what they're working through. You want to see them make connections. You want to see them win. You want to see them succeed. So yeah, I can't say if you like the first one, you're gonna love the second one, because I know a lot of people that love the first one think the second one's only okay. But I also know a lot of people that think the first one's okay like me and absolutely adore the second one. I don't know what it is, but each film has something unique that connects with a lot of people. So whether you want to shoot a blaster or shed a tear, this is a movie that definitely takes you to the stars. Spider-Man fans are interesting. And I mean that in the literal sense. It's not code for bitter, crazy, or obsessive. I mean, actually interesting. When the first Spider-Man movie came out, people went crazy. This is it. This is Spider-Man on the big screen. They totally got it right. And then, when the second reboot came out, everyone said, oh yeah, that old Spider-Man crap, that's history. This is the one that gets it right. This is the one that finally nailed it. And now we're on the third reboot, Spider-Man Homecoming. And, yep, this is the one that gets it right. The others were crap. This is the one that totally nails it. Awesome, so we finally get Spider-Man as an actual man? Oh, no, he's still a boy again. Okay, the others did that. I guess it'll be nice to see him hook up with Mary Jane again. Oh, she's not even revealed as Mary Jane until the end. But at least she's that confident Spitfire or really cynical hates everything girl now. Well, his relationship with aging Aunt May must... Whoa, that's different. Well, it'll be fun seeing him work as a photographer for the Daily Bugle. That's not in this either. Well, at least he still has issues battling bullies who are kind of bigger geeks than him. Well, you know what? As long as they get the core, the whole reason for him being Spider-Man, the death of his Uncle Ben, not even mentioned. I'm not even sure if Uncle Ben exists in this universe. Wow, that's kind of like taking away Batman's parents. It's honestly the reason he is who he is. But this is the Spider-Man we've all been waiting for? I mean, just look at that poster. Isn't that exactly how we want to see the best version of Spider-Man? Okay, before you bring down that anvil of hate on me, keep in mind, I think this is a good movie. I think you could argue one of the more entertaining, if not the most entertaining of the Spider-Man films. Tom Holland plays Peter Parker this time, and the whole movie is based around him trying to be the amazing Spider-Man, while also trying to have a normal social life and live up to his hero, Iron Man, played again by Robert Downey Jr. But of course there's trouble on the horizon as an evil villain called the Vulture, played by another Birdman, Michael Keaton, is trying to get revenge for his job and life being ruined. Add a lot of comedy, twists and turns, and some really fun performances, and you get a very funny, very enjoyable Marvel movie. Yeah, that's kind of the big difference between this Spider-Man movie and the others. The others were Spider-Man films that just happened to be Marvel. This is a Marvel film that just happens to be Spider-Man. Spider-Man, don't get me wrong, is supposed to be funny and at times lighthearted, but it's also supposed to be big. There's a reason he's one of the most famous superheroes there is. It isn't just the powers, it's the story, it's the character, it's the conflict. And that's dabbled with here, but there's nothing really that grand or epic about it. The other Spider-Mans, for all their problems, were big movies. This, I think, is kind of on the level of Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man. But Ant-Man isn't Spider-Man. Spider-Man is Spider-Man. And when I think Spider-Man, I think of him walking home after letting his uncle down, his head hanging low, thinking about with great power comes great responsibility. What I got out of this was, I really want to make Tony Stark happy. Nailed it? Now, with all that said, I know exactly why they made these choices, and honestly, they are the perfect choices to make. This is the third Spider-Man reboot in a very short amount of time. People are sick of seeing him get bitten by the spider. People are sick of seeing Uncle Ben get shot. They're sick of all these repeated story elements that we've seen a million times. Marvel very wisely takes a completely different angle. It does make it more light. It does make it more fun. It does make it more goofy. You know, not Sam Raimi goofy, but Marvel goofy, the goofy that we all have grown to love. From a business standpoint and an entertainment standpoint, this makes total sense to do. You can't do another big Spider-Man, not right now anyway. You need something smaller, you need something cuter, you need something lighter. They had to deal with the limitations of the audience's knowledge, which is they've already seen 2 Spider-Man series, and more are apparently on the way. So yeah, the changes to this movie are actually very clever. I'll even go as far to say needed to be done. I like that they focus a lot on the high schoolers and the New Yorkers and their overall goofy attitude. Keaton is hands down my favorite Spider-Man villain, both being kind of funny but legitimately creepy at the same time. And the action, while not as epic as the other films, is still a lot of fun and very smart. I just don't get why everyone says this is their big epic Spider-Man movie. Be really honest, if you knew nothing about Spider-Man and you just went into this film completely blind, would you say this is one of the great superhero movies? Would you say that was huge, epic, I can see this lasting for years and years? I honestly can't. But at the same time, compared to the other Spider-Man movies, there's kind of fewer flaws. The Sam Raimi films, you can make fun of how goofy and over the top and awkward they are. The Webb films, you can argue how overly complicated they are. Comparatively, this has the least problems, and I think that's why so many people do see it as the best Spider-Man film. But because I do see Spider-Man as a very big and even very important character, I really feel that size and importance isn't represented here. My hope honestly is with future movies they kinda work backwards. Maybe they can show in flashbacks Uncle Ben and something that happened to him, or maybe go more into why Spider-Man does what he does and him growing up and becoming an actual man. Because here, even though I love seeing him interact with Tony Stark, that's not what should make him want to be Spider-Man. It's funny because there's a scene where Tony Stark comes in and takes the suit away and says you have to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And yeah, I really agree with that. The movie should have thought about why Spider-Man is Spider-Man. The other two films did. This one, I guess, just wants to be a fanboy of Stark, and call me crazy, that's not what I think Spider-Man is about. I would like to see more depth. I would like to see it go darker. I'd much rather have a Spider-Man movie go all the way and take risks, because if you don't take risks, you're not gonna be big, you're not gonna be epic, you're not gonna be daring. Yeah, the other movies had problems but took chances, and they seemed larger because of it. Even though it didn't always work out, they knew they had to try something big and daring with a character who's so big and daring. So overall, Spider-Man Homecoming is a lot of fun, and it is charming, and it is funny, and I enjoyed it a great deal. But there's no way I can say this is the definitive Spider-Man, this is the one that gets it right. It's got the lighthearted feel with a lot of charm, but not much more. And Spider-Man is much more. But, like I said, Spider-Man fans seem to love the hell out of it, regular moviegoers seem to love the hell out of it, so maybe I'm missing something. I still had a great time and really recommend it, but in terms of representing one of the greatest superheroes who's been around for years and years, I think we still got a long way to go before this Spider-Boy becomes a Spider-Man. Okay, I see how it works. When I don't like Thor the Dark World, it's, oh, you don't understand Thor! Natalie Portman and Kat Dennings are amazing! Oh, you just don't get it! But then when Thor Ragnarok comes around, it's, oh, we finally got a good Thor movie! Oh, no Natalie Portman or Kat Dennings! Oh, they finally understand! Blow me, you symbolic voice I've decided to clump all of the internet I don't like into! Anyway, Thor Ragnarok is a funny, big, epic, action-packed fun time. It's not especially deep or very meaningful, but it finally gives us a story and visuals that look on par with what Thor was, or at the very least, an 80s rock cover, which is what Thor should be, damn it! After returning from a giant mission, Thor discovers that Loki, his brother, has disguised himself as Odin and he forces him to change back. When he demands Loki to take him to his real father, they find he doesn't have much time left. In a quick change of tone that's surprisingly effective, we see him slowly fade away while also giving information about their actual firstborn. Hela, the banished rightful heir, is going to come and reclaim her throne the minute he dies. And seeing how he told them this the minute he died, they don't have much time to prepare and she comes and attacks. She and her army banish Thor and Loki to another realm where they're used as entertainment, a part of the galaxy of gladiators, media, bounty hunters, and Jeff Goldblum. Because somehow strangely this movie feels naked without him. Thor is captured to fight for ruler Goldblum's amusement, and wouldn't you know it, one of the other captured gladiators is the Hulk. The problem is though, the Hulk has stayed the Hulk for a long time, he hasn't turned back human in quite a while. So Thor has a lot on his plate. He has to turn the Hulk back to himself, escape, defeat his sister, and also stop Ragnarok, the destruction of his entire kingdom. So that's quite a lot to throw at you in one movie, and smartly the film doesn't take it too seriously. Sometimes that can be a problem as there's an occasional joke that almost doesn't feel very Thor-like, but we're used to that from the other Thor movies. Honestly, here I almost argue it's downplayed. That's not to say the film doesn't have some dramatic moments, it's just not especially dramatic. It's just enough so that we want to be on their side when they're flying around, throwing swords and breathing fire and doing all the cool stuff we want to see in a Thor movie. The laughs make us enjoy them more, the effects show the cool things they can do while they're making us laugh. So when we get to the really big action sequences, we're entirely on board. It's not Lord of the Rings or Lawrence of Arabia, but I don't think it's really meant to be. It's supposed to be a comic book movie. A comic book movie of gods fighting each other and blowing shit up and saying cool one-liners. At the center of it are the incredibly charming characters. The one good thing in every single Thor movie is always Thor himself. Chris Hemsworth is just so charming, whether he has to be funny, whether he has to be badass, whether he has to be big, whether he has to be subtle, he works for whatever's needed. It's also great to see Eric Bana focused on. I feel like this is the Hulk movie we also really deserved but never got. It's interesting that he would actually want to stay the Hulk for a long time, like he chose to do so. And when he doesn't want to change back into the Hulk again, he's constantly surrounded by people who glorify it. They praise the monster, they praise the violence, which is actually kind of an interesting commentary when you think about it. He's trying to run away from being the awful beast in a world where everybody wants him to be the awful beast. You could almost argue that's the Hulk's complicated movie history in a nutshell. I also like this drunk bounty hunter who's got a real tragic backstory, but still gets a lot of good laughs as well. The only problem I have is she's supposed to be a literal fall-down drunk. Why does she always look that good? Shouldn't her hair be a little messed up or a little sloppy? If you can't even stand, how do you get your eyeliner that perfect? I guess I shouldn't talk when you see Cate Blanchett throughout this entire picture. Good God. This design is crazy, and her acting totally backs it. It's big, it's loud, it's intense, it's totally having fun with every moment. I guess if I had any criticism, it would have been that the film could have been cut down by a good 15-20 minutes. It didn't need to be this long. I also argue that maybe a little bit more drama would have been welcomed, but I am still happy with what we got, especially compared with the other two. Thor Ragnarok is a big, goofy movie in all the right ways. It's got the charm, it's got the action, it's got the cool effects. It's my definition of a good popcorn movie. It's just enough to get invested, but you don't have to think too hard about it either. It's just stupid fun that took a lot of smart planning to accomplish. Cross the rainbow bridge and enjoy your hammer time. We did it! We defeated racism! And all it took was Black Panther! Finally, a black superhero, we've seen that before, but a big budget comic book movie with a lot of black people in it, we've seen that before, but it made a lot of money, yeah. And it's actually so good the Oscars tried to create a new category so that they could give it an Oscar! This is getting kind of weird. Okay, years from now you might be looking back at this saying, what the hell was I talking about? But the hype around this movie was crazy, both before and especially after it came out. People act like this was the Schindler's List of superhero films, like there was never anything better, will never be anything better. We did it, we reached perfection. And me, being the sniveling jerk-off that I am, of course had to go, yeah, it's good. I might even go see it again. I say that not because I saw anything majorly wrong with the film, but I saw it almost reaching that epic level and kind of pulling back at the last minute. Which is fine, it's still a good movie, I just never quite got on the bandwagon like everyone else. As you probably remember from Civil War, Black Panther is a superhero who tries to fight for justice. It also turns out he's a prince though, who's now being appointed to king. From where, you may ask? The land of Wakanda. A technologically advanced superworld whose technology is kept from the rest of the Earth. Why? They feel the world is not ready for such technology and that mankind is just a little too, well, goddamn crazy. Wakanda seems to have crime as well, but its culture is a lot heavier and the people seem a lot more peaceful. That is, until an enemy from the past named Killmonger comes around. Played by Michael B. Jordan. One of the best, if not the best, Marvel villain we've ever gotten. He thinks Wakanda should not only open its doors to the rest of the world, but it should invade, attack, kill those who abuse the power they have. As the story goes on, we find out he actually has the possibility of becoming king, and challenges Black Panther to a duel. For such a peaceful culture, it's a very strange way of working your government. From there, of course, there's action, technology, sidekicks, big armies, all that cool stuff. There's easily a lot to like in this film. Number one, again, being for me, the villain. He's very identifiable, you know why he's doing what he's doing, and you even almost agree to it. Like many great villains, he just goes that one step too far, but you're kind of following him on all the other steps, or at least you identify with where he's coming from. His acting is so great too. You get an idea that this guy from the streets wouldn't really fit in with this cast that talks really big and epic and has this grand language. But he just walks in like he always owned the place and immediately takes command and charge, and he's just amazing. Truth be told, the side characters really upstage the main character in this, which I think is kind of a problem. Not that the main character's bad or unlikable or annoying or anything, he's just kinda dull. He's not really Black Panther that often. You don't see him go through that much of a huge journey in terms of learning what it means to be king and getting responsibility and so forth. He just kind of seems like the nice guy trying to do the right thing. Which is fine, but the movie is called Black Panther. I want to know more about Black Panther. I want to find him more interesting. There's a scene where he's at his lowest point and he's practically banished. Some even think he's dead, and I thought, well, this will be like a great Moses story. He'll go through all this realization and he'll go through the spiritual journey and he'll come back and he'll learn a lot. And I guess he kinda does, but they don't really put that much focus on it. Again, I remember the side characters' journeys through this moment more than I do his journey. The effects of this movie are also not very good, surprisingly. That is to say, Wakanda looks amazing. Anytime they cut to the city, it just looks phenomenal. I'm assuming this is where all the money for the CG effects went because the rest of the CG looks really bad. Thank God this movie does have interesting ideas and characters, because if it just relied on the action, that really wouldn't fly. Even the big climax, if they really want to make this huge, they would have had Black Panther and Killmonger like on the top of a tall temple fighting against a sunset, something crazy like that. But no, it's on these fake looking train tracks and it just looks stupid. This isn't epic, this is if Marvel did straight to DVD movies. And even the big battle happening above with the side characters doesn't seem especially epic because some of their motivations we don't even get, or the connections with other characters. I mean, there's a scene where the Captain of the Guards has to take on like the new Captain of the Guards, and they had kind of a connection, but they didn't really dive into it much. So yeah, I wanted to be 100% on board with this. I wanted to shout, this is epic, this is huge. But a lot of those little distractions did constantly get in the way for me. I feel like if they cut out a few other elements, like maybe the Andy Serkis character, we could have had more time to focus on these people and sort of relate to them even more. But again, the ones we do relate to, we really relate to. And the issues and problems they bring up are good issues and problems, and they lead to a lot of interesting questions. I also do get where people are coming from when they say this is an important movie, because yeah, there are movies out there, comic book movies that star black people, but not usually this many and not on such a grand scale, so it is nice to get that representation. But I don't think that makes it an instant masterpiece when there are very obviously some clear problems with it. Not god-awful problems, but enough to take notice. Nevertheless, this is still a very enjoyable movie, and does do things a little differently than other Marvel films, at least in terms of the issues and ideas it brings up. It still ends with a traditional Marvel climax, it still has the typical Marvel jokes, but the look is very different, the culture is very different, and like I said before, some of these dilemmas are very different. It's still a really good movie, and I really recommend it. I want to see even more, in fact. I'd love to see a Black Panther 2, 3, 4. I'd love to see more of these characters. I'd love to see how they develop. Like I said, I didn't really feel Black Panther himself was all that interesting. Maybe we can really make him interesting. Maybe we can find out even more about him and what kind of guy he is. So I'd say check it out, but let's face it, you already have checked it out. But go ahead and check it out a few more times to see what works, see what doesn't, and hopefully get a lot of Black Panther sequels in the future. Let's finish up Disneycember with arguably the biggest Marvel movie to date, Avengers: Infinity War. This film has been so built up, it's crazy. And surprisingly enough, it isn't just from the advertising. Since the first Avengers movie where Thanos was revealed, they've been hyping up his appearance in practically every other flick. Thanos is coming, he's gonna be here soon! It got to a point where it was actually comical. To a point where it was almost annoying. People started to say there's no way they're gonna live up to the hype they're building up. We're sick of hearing Thanos is coming, just do something with him already. You know what? Thanos doesn't even look that great, he just looks like a big purple blob monster who's gonna do, I don't know, smile. So even though there was a lot of excitement around this movie, there was a lot of speculation too. But amazingly, the part of the movie everybody thought would be the weakest link is the strongest part. Josh Brolin as Thanos not only looks amazing with this incredible motion capture, but he has to be hands down the best Marvel villain out of any of these movies. After just being teased with snippets of him in the other films, this is entirely his movie. It's his story. Why is he doing this? How is he doing this? What's going through his mind? What does he care about? What's he going to do next? He's actually so interesting the Avengers are almost distracting, and those are incredibly charming characters. The plot, I'll attempt to sum up, there is a ton going on, is that Thanos has taken over Thor and Loki's ship, destroyed everybody on it, which kinda sucks, Thor Ragnarok was kind of for no reason, and even ends up beating the shit out of the Hulk. The Hulk, goddamn! Hulk lands on Earth though and lets him know that Thanos is coming. Thanos sends out his minions to look for the rest of the Infinity Stones. You see, if he gets all the Infinity Stones and puts them on his Infinity Gauntlet, he can fulfill his ultimate goal of wiping out half of humanity. His thought is whenever a population is getting too big, they become too dangerous, so wiping out half of them will bring balance back. It doesn't even matter who they are, it's just half. He did this before with Gamora's people and he actually ended up raising her. She, not surprisingly, resents him quite a bit, and does everything in her power to stop him, but he's just too cunning and too manipulative to be defeated. The more the Avengers try to get together, ironically the more they get split up. The Infinity Stones are spread out far across the galaxy, so that means a lot of them have to go to different places to try and get them. Can they reach them in time and stop Thanos before he wipes out half of the human race? Well, I'm not gonna give away the ending, but prepare for your kids to be scarred for life. The funny thing about Infinity War is that what I usually see as cons in a movie, I actually see as pros in this one. The characters are not given much introduction. There's not even that much sitting down and talking about their feelings or emotions or anything like that. They're just kind of running into the action. But here's the thing, we already know these characters. We've had movie upon movie upon movie finding out about these characters. So when you do see them together, you don't just want Captain America talking about himself or Star-Lord talking about himself. You want to see them interact off each other. And that's exactly what we get. Iron Man and Doctor Strange have been called very similar, so they of course don't get along. Star-Lord and Thor are both cocky fighters, so they obviously try to one-up each other. Spider-Man is always looking for Tony Stark's approval, so they have kind of a father-son relationship. While they're constantly fighting and going from place to place, they are still making connections, and they're using just the right choice words to establish themselves and their relationships as, well, incredibly likable. Even when they don't get along, there's an incredible charm to them. In most action movies, when characters get together and bicker, it feels lame. It's like those stupid buddy cop movies or those dumbass romantic comedies where they just complain the whole time and yet somehow they get along. But here, they're so well set up, you love when they don't get along. They're funny, their quips are wonderful, and you like seeing how they actually do kind of come together. It got to a point where even the smallest cameos got a cheer from everybody because they knew they were gonna be done right. Even if they didn't say much or do much, you knew that was them. They were there, they were interacting with everybody, they were helping out. The universe feels so defined. The only part that drags a little is there's a scene where Thor has to meet up with this giant, played very cleverly by Peter Dinklage. And it's not just because that's a little person playing a big person, it's because his dimensions are different. It isn't just taking an average sized person and making him bigger. Peter Dinklage has a very distinct, uniquely shaped body. So to make that larger gives a visual and a movement we haven't really seen before out of a giant. But it goes on way too long. Every single time it cut back to him at this weird gate and trying to move all these little technical gadgets around, I just didn't care. Maybe because the action here wasn't very interesting and what they were talking about wasn't very interesting. But everywhere else, the dialogue and the action are fantastic. Again, especially from Thanos. I can't believe how much they won me over with this character. I was so ready to not like the motion capture. Why can't they just do practical effects? I was so ready to be bored by him. Nah, you built him up too long, now we're not interested. But he really was the best part, somehow supplying both the menace and the heart of the movie. What can I say? The wait was worth it. Infinity War is a big movie that has a lot of big effects and a lot of big battles and a lot of big characters and a lot of big story. It's the kind of movie where you want a lot going on. It's the kind of movie where you want a lot of things blowing up and people looking pained and going from one place to another. And it can do that because it's had so many films building up to it. This was a gamble that definitely paid off. Just when you're starting to get tired of the Marvel formula and you're kind of looking for something different, they up their game, like they usually do. They seem to know just when to mix it up a little bit more and exactly how to mix it up, while still seeming familiar. It's the same characters with brand new challenges. Ant-Man and Wasp is a screwball comedy in a Marvel superhero movie's clothing. And I mean that in the most complimentary way. Everything about the setup of this film feels like a farce, like something out of What's Up Doc or Fawlty Towers or one of those great comedies. It just also happens to have a lot of ass kicking and people in superhero costumes that can shrink really, really small. Actually, the more I think about it, how could this not be a screwball comedy? Coming out after Avengers Infinity War, but taking place just a little before those events, it's the perfect palate cleanser after something so gigantic and serious. But that's not to say it doesn't have a few serious moments and definitely some gigantic moments as well. Ant-Man, played again by Paul Rudd, is under house arrest after the events of Captain America: Civil War. This movie sets its tone perfectly, as one of the first big major action sequences is just playing with his daughter in this giant cardboard maze and this cardboard slide that really looks freaking cool. I want this thing! But it looks like Wasp and her father need him again to find the original Wasp, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. It looks like she shrank so small she went into a different dimension, time zone thingy in comic books, and only the three of them combined can figure out how to get her back. While that's going on, another thief who can go through walls named Ghost is trying to find a way to cure her condition because it's not actually the suit that makes her go through walls, it's the suit that keeps her more solid. That's actually a really good twist on that idea. While that's going on, there's heists, breaking into places, car chases, backstabbing, mistaken identities, and all sorts of various things that I guess you would find in a superhero movie now, but back then it used to be for a screwball comedy. And you know what? They go together really well. What I really like about this movie, on top of, again, the brilliant ingenuity and them getting small and getting big and having the strength and just doing everything you can with this idea, is that when the movie needs to be serious, it still works out okay, while also being a little funny too. I think the best example is there's a scene where the personality of Michelle Pfeiffer goes inside Paul Rudd, and he talks as Pfeiffer, like he's talking to his daughter and doing a great impression of her, and it's both really touching and sympathetic, but it's also pretty funny. You're kind of giggling at this guy who's touching the face of this woman who he's romantically interested in, but he's totally talking to her like her mother. There's quite a few scenes like that which work both dramatically and comedically. The climax is 100% screwball, with all these different people wanting different things, and one character has it and the device flies into someone else's hands and then they have to run away and somebody else has to take another road, and add on top of that people getting bigger, smaller, super big, super small. It's just a blast. When I think of a comic book series that's just fun, it works. You're with the characters, you want to see them get all the way through, but it never goes quite too serious or overly dramatic, I think of the Ant-Man movies. I just feel like I'm reading a really charming comic book. Like, you know, one of the funnier issues where they have silly one-liners and people goof up, and yeah, you can get to the serious ones later, but for now, let's just have a few laughs. We can take it seriously in all the other issues, but let's just show them having fun in this one. It's like when I read the X-Men comics, I found myself really enjoying the ones where they were just kind of chilling and having some downtime. They felt more real, they felt more three-dimensional. So yeah, it's not one of the great comic book films or anything, but it's just a ton of fun and really takes advantage of the ideas that they have. Granted, I never read Ant-Man, so I have no idea if this is really faithful, or maybe it was a more serious comic, I'm not sure. But as a movie series, if you're looking for a good time, this packs a big punch in a small package. The only knowledge I had of Captain Marvel before I saw the movie was there's this VR game I would play where she was by far the best character. I always hear she's the character that Rogue steals the powers from, but I don't know if that's the same one or not. I'm going more by bare bone characteristics, what we know about her. And from the VR game, it looks like she's confident, funny, a little cocky, and a jet pilot that knows how to kick ass with her superpowers. Boy, I wish that's what I got here. That is to say, I'm sure that's what this movie wanted to be, but what we finally got is really... oh, what are the words I'm looking for? Pandering and boring. A lot of people try to compare this to Wonder Woman, which in my opinion is apples and oranges, but I guess I get it. It's the first big female superhero in this lineup. DC has Wonder Woman, Marvel has Captain Marvel, and man, they couldn't be more opposite, because Wonder Woman was awesome, and this is not. The story is boring Captain Marvel is being trained by boring Jude Law on this boring alien planet that looks like every other boring alien planet, and they have to stop this evil boring alien race, which leads her to boring old Earth where boring young Samuel L. Jackson is. Give credit that a lot of the movie is not her trying to convince him that she's an alien, he picks up on it pretty quick. But take away that credit when you find the whole movie is going to be told out of order. Why? Because this is every Marvel movie you've seen with nothing new added, so this will hopefully make it new. It doesn't. It makes it even blander. I don't know why people think if you just move things around suddenly it'll be deeper. You have to actually tell the story in an interesting way and deliver the information in an interesting way, and that's not what this does, because we've seen these movies! We've seen these Marvel movies where they go through the exact same things. They just move it around, and that doesn't really change much. At the center of this film's problems is Brie Larson, who sadly does not come across as the superhero type at all. I say sadly because in a couple scenes she can be kinda charming. I like when she first lands on Earth and she kinda comedically tries to figure out where she is talking to people, and those scenes work okay. But when she has to act tough or in charge or emotional or anything like that, it just doesn't work. It's actually almost laughable.
He lied to me. Your people are terrorists. They kill innocents. I don't even know who I am.
At first I thought maybe Brie Larson was never that good, but I went back and I watched Room again and I saw Kong Skull Island for the first time, and yeah, not only could she take a really well-written role and make it even more interesting, but she could take a very relative run-of-the-mill role and actually make it very charming. I like her in both these movies, so maybe it's just the direction, which wouldn't surprise me. There's a subplot in this movie I'm really getting tired about, with her powers being tied to her emotions. Yeah, haven't heard that yet, have you? Tell me more, Tetsuo, Elsa, Fire Princess, wherever else you want to throw in that category. Honestly, it wouldn't even be that bad if there was some emotion to focus on. They keep saying you have to keep your anger under control, you can't emote that much, and she already isn't. Like they say, she can only use her powers when she's really angry, and every time she uses them, she doesn't seem that angry. She doesn't even seem interested half the time. When we finally get to, I guess, the emotional climax of the film, it shows all these scenes of her falling down and then getting up, like, yeah, she never gave up, that was the moral of the story? It was? This ties in less to the movie and more feels like a Disney commercial on girl empowerment. Can't you see them saying, I am a princess, I am strong, I am brave, while all this is going on?
I am a princess. Sometimes I am brave even when I am scared. I believe in loyalty and trust.
The only thing that's kinda new, and I won't go too much into detail about, is these aliens. Without giving away too much, we find out there is kind of a secret to them, and yeah, I don't really see that much in movies about these kind of aliens, so I like that. But aside from that, you can predict every character arc, every one-liner, every scene where they're supposed to be surprising you, but they don't really, because we've seen it a million times in other Marvel movies. Is it the absolute worst? No, and honestly, I know a lot of people who enjoy this, and if you do, great. I can't really think of anything god-awful in it that's gonna mess anyone up by watching it. But for me, it just felt boring, stale, and awkward. A shame, because this looks like a really cool superhero. When she puts that little helmet on and has the mohawk, it's like, hell yeah, I want to see what's up with this character. But if this is really the most that can be explored with her, then I say the altered logo at the beginning is the most feels you're gonna get out of it. Avengers Endgame is the most epic, satisfying, groundbreaking, crowd-pleasing third act of a Marvel movie I've ever seen. The rest is long, drawn out, meandering, even repetitive at times, and feels more like a director's extended cut than a final picture, which there is a big difference. Remember the extended cut of Return of the King? It's neat, but as an extended cut, if you released this in theaters, it'd probably drive people insane. In fact, Return of the King is a pretty good analogy for this because I kind of feel like it's in reverse. Where in that movie, the majority of it is epic and awesome and the ending goes on too much, here, the majority of it goes on too much, but it ends on such an incredible strong note. But the one thing both Return of the King and Avengers Endgame have in common is they've earned it. For many of these characters, this is the end of a 10-year journey, something that's never been done in film like this, at least definitely not on this scale. It's a rare thing, and most people know that going into it, so I think a little leeway is allowed. The story, oh wait, do I have to say this? Spoilers? Do I have to say spoilers just to talk about the basic story of this? Yeah, people went nuts if you even said the name of a character in this. It kind of got insane. But look, I'm not gonna give away who lives or who dies or anything that everybody couldn't figure out. For Christ's sake, another Spider-Man movie was being advertised when this was being advertised. I think most people know the people that disappear from the snap are coming back. Or do you think Disney and Marvel thought this was such a good marketing choice to leave them all dead? Just use your brains. Anyway, 5 years have passed since the infamous Thanos snap, and what's left of the Avengers, as well as what's left of the world, have had a difficult time adapting to it. People have lost friends, families, partners. It's really torn everybody apart. Some have found peace, like the Hulk finally managed to balance himself out, being both half human and half Hulk. Tony Stark had his own family and is actually a good husband and father. But everything changes when Ant-Man is suddenly released from the dimensional portal thingamajig that he got lost in his movie. And he says this device might be useful to go back in time and change things in a way that doesn't really change things, and oh god, it's that time travel shit they're gonna act like makes sense but totally doesn't. So okay, on the one hand, you kinda know time travel has to play a part in this. I mean, how can't it? And honestly, it kinda surprised me the way they did it. I mean, I thought it was gonna be this one way, it was something totally different. But it does lead to a lot of problems, which I guess any story involving time travel would. It's not that it doesn't make sense, it's that it acts like it makes sense. Like, no, this is how it works. Forget about what you see in movies, and it pretty much does what they do in movies. In fact, I was kind of hoping they were going to do like what they did in 12 Monkeys, where you can't really change the past. In fact, they were really building that up, and I thought, oh my god, this will be brilliant. Like, you have to go back and watch Avengers and these other movies and realize, oh, they were there doing all this stuff in the background where you couldn't see it. But nope, you can totally change the past, because they change a lot, and different timelines are born because of it, but this one timeline has to stay the same, so they have to go back and return these stones. But if so many things are already being changed, which you just said couldn't be changed, like characters going on to Disney Plus shows, how does any of this make sense? I guess when I heard time travel, I got really excited because I just sort of assumed this present that they have now maybe wouldn't exist and they have to alter it. And holy shit, what about Tony Stark and his family? I mean, would there be this big thing where he has to like give up the existence of his daughter in order to have this other timeline happen? Wow, that's one of the deepest questions that's ever been asked in a Marvel movie. This is really going to the next level. Oh, they're just saying no, that's not a thing. Which I know isn't fair. I should stop imagining what I want a film to be and accept it for what it is. And yeah, you can say that, but when it's introducing so many ideas that aren't being taken advantage of, you kinda notice it a little more. For example, the Thanos they fight in this isn't the same Thanos, which again, I won't get into too many details, but it's not the one that did the snap, so it just doesn't feel as satisfying. There's other things that get under my skin too. For example, there's one character that dies in the middle of the movie, and most of the deaths I'm okay with, but this one I'm not. Everything around it feels empty and pointless. Everything about the character in terms of the involvement with other characters and stuff, they're kind of building up one thing and then just suddenly that character is gone and it just feels like nothing. To a point where in the next Spider-Man movie they reference it and I kind of had to remind myself it even happened. It left that little an impact. There's other scenes like where Tony Stark goes and meets his father in the past. Again, this is something I'd want to see in an extended scene, not really in the final product. As well as a scene where Thor sees his mother, and I guess it's supposed to be funny and emotional, but it just comes across as kind of awkward to me. So much of these movies are based around the characters' interactions, and I realize when half of them are gone, you're not getting as much of it, and it's just not as interesting. Maybe a scene with Thor and his mother might have been emotional, maybe a scene with Tony and his father might have been the same, but when you have to combine it with everything else, it just feels like way too much. Even when the action starts, it's all kind of action we've already seen. I mean, some of it's cool. There's a scene where two Captain Americas fight, that's kind of neat. But what are you really rooting for here? Oh, I hope they get that thing you know they're gonna get, or even if they don't, you know they're gonna get it somewhere else? Because the villain is not in a lot of the movie, and when he is, it's kind of a different one, you don't really get that conflict as much. When Black Panther and Killmonger are fighting, you feel that buildup. When Spider-Man and the Vulture are talking, you feel that buildup. When Captain America is fighting Captain America, cool. When Hawkeye's battling these criminals we saw for a few seconds, neat. And again, when we do finally see the main bad guy, a lot of it's just telling him what we already know. Even the Avengers that are there are a little different. Thor's a bum now, and Hulk is kind of a geek, and everything just feels a little off, which you could argue is the point. Like something is missing, and they're gonna go get it back, and fair enough, but I also realize it was almost a year between Infinity War and this. Everybody has had a lot of time to really accept, holy smokes, these characters vanished. I mean, we know they'll come back, but man, what a gut-wrenching moment. We've had a year to let this sink in, and now we have like an hour and a half of trying to tell you, yeah, that was a real bad thing that happened. We know! We have a year to think about it! But, two big things. One, not everyone's gonna see it this way. Years down the line, people are gonna rent these and watch them back to back, and yeah, it's gonna make more sense to see the characters dealing with these people being gone, so I get that. Two, not only does it build up to an amazing third act that I wouldn't change a thing about, I mean, it's absolutely perfect, but this is a very tricky story to tell. It's hard to tell in a way that's interesting, it's hard to tell in a way that makes sense. It's just a difficult movie to do that's gonna wrap up so many characters and get other characters their stories and their plot lines going, and yeah, I get it. It's a rough movie to pull off. So that's why I still say it's good. I mean, what am I gonna get that angry about? That I spent too much time on character? I mean, how often do I get to say that? A lot of people like the extended cuts of movies, and so do I for that matter, but you can definitely tell when it feels like an extended cut, and that's what this feels like. So yeah, it's not perfect, and I feel like people that watch it more and more are kind of seeing stuff that doesn't always connect together, but I wouldn't dare say don't go see it. I mean, like I said, the third act alone is absolute perfection. I never thought I would see something like this on the big screen. So many Marvel characters that I grew up reading and seeing on TV, and they're all there. Okay, it's not a perfect world, but they're mostly there. I remember when it was a big deal that Superman and Matrix and Pirates were going to shoot 2 movies back to back. Like, wow, that so rarely happens. And here, you have a whole enterprise of movies that's lasted over 10 years, and they all have to connect in one way or another, and that's insane. And they're so successful, and they're so entertaining, and even the bad ones aren't that bad. I mean, look at their worst. Thor the Dark World, Iron Man 2, Captain Marvel. We've had Batman and Robin, Superman 4, and Green Lantern. For their worst to be only that bad, that's impressive. Everything about this franchise was and still is impressive. We've never had something like this in cinema, and I don't know if we ever will again, at least not to this size. We'll still have new, big, and inspiring things, and yeah, at some point I'm sure this whole Marvel franchise movie cinematic universe thing will fade out. But at the very least we know there was a time when a lot of energy, a lot of thought, a lot of careful planning, and a lot of love went into giving fans what they always wanted to see on the big screen. In that respect, Endgame really is a perfect wrap-up for a lot of these characters. Because yeah, not everything works and I have some disagreements like any fan does, but the parts that are massive, fun, smart, entertaining, and just mind-blowing to see on the big screen makes it more than worth it.
Assemble.
Well, we're at it again. Time to talk about the best Spider-Man movie ever made. And time for me again, like a jackass, to go, yeah, that was good. Even better than the last one. That was good. Okay, I'm gonna give this movie a little bit more credit. It does step up several things a lot more compared to its predecessor. Peter Parker is back as the web-slinging hero still attending class, but he's feeling a lot more melancholy this time because of spoiler. Yeah, spoiler, there's a spoiler, even though you all know it. You all know what this is. Spoiler, spoiler, I said the word, you happy? Anywho, spoiler. Tony Stark is dead. What? Next you'll tell me Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Oh, you said that, spoiler! Anyway, Peter's obviously feeling very bummed because after his passing is kind of Uncle Ben, if you will, working a little backwards, but then okay, I'm kind of okay with this. He gets all these cool gadgets that apparently Stark had planned out for him to use because he want him to kind of take his place, so to speak. But Peter, still just being a boy in high school, doesn't think he has the responsibility to take it on. As you know, with great power, yada yada yada. When traveling to Venice on a school trip, he sees someone else that he thinks would handle that responsibility a lot better. A super being from another dimension called Mysterio. He forms a pretty strong friendship with him, and the more he talks, the more he realizes he doesn't want this responsibility. I know, a Spider-Man movie where he doesn't want to be Spider-Man, imagine. The rest of the movie is stuff you've usually seen in Spider-Man films, but it's still done relatively well. He has to make sure nobody knows his secret identity while constantly always trying to save the day. He wants to form a relationship with Mary Jane. He has to pass his classes while making sure nobody dies, all that kind of stuff. So okay, there's really two ways you can kinda come at this film, and neither is really the wrong way. The way I think a lot of people come at it is, this is a Spider-Man issue. It's another story. It has some depth, it has some intrigue, it has some laughs, it has a lot of charm to it, and it does that totally fine. It does a good job. I liked it. Are there awkward moments? Sure, but what Spider-Man movie doesn't have that? The way I want to come to this movie, but I'm trying to tell myself not to because I just don't think it's the right way to do it, is as a Spider-Man movie. A big film. Like when one of these came out, they were kind of these big epic stories with big epic villains. But like the last one, this is clearly an MCU movie that just happens to be Spider-Man. And I can kinda see why. We don't really have a superhero in the MCU that's like this. It's just a kid going to high school and it's kinda smaller stories, and yeah, it's always the world's gonna be destroyed and some big bad guy's gonna kill people, whatever. But it's nothing really that new or epic compared to some of their bigger stories like Infinity War, Guardians 2, and so forth. But in a strange way, this might weirdly work. I think the series is kind of doing the slow burn. I mean, you know the general story. Parker gets these powers and then discovers the big responsibility that's involved when somebody close to him dies. And that, even though they don't do it in one movie, it's kinda what still is going on here. With Tony Stark, I feel like they no longer need the Uncle Ben character, even though they're kinda hinting that he is in this universe. The ending of this movie I won't give away, but it's hinting towards something that's never been done in the Spider-Man movies before, and I'm so excited for it. It feels like it's taking it to the next level, and it's doing so in a very slow way. But yeah, as a standalone film, can I still say this is it? They finally got Spider-Man right again? I don't know. I don't think we're there yet, but I don't know if we're supposed to be there yet. The other Spider-Man movies had to squeeze a lot of epic storytelling into these short time spans. I mean, this is years and years of comic books being put in. This one might just be taking its time. It's kind of like when you watch a TV series and you see those first few episodes and you're like, this is fine, but you don't say this is one of the great shows. You wait until episode 4 or 5 or maybe even a later season in order to say that. So because of that, some of the issues do stick out a little bit more to me. For example, the original story behind the villain I thought was better than the actual story behind him. Again, I won't give too much away, but what they were setting up before I thought was a little cooler, and yeah, I know the original is closer to the comics, and it actually very cleverly ties into Stark, but it's kind of like what they did in Iron Man 3 where they kind of trick you with the villain, but the thing is, they still had another threat, another big something that was intimidating for the main hero to go against. This one, it's still just the thing they tricked you with, so the climax doesn't feel especially big or important. It's just kind of another stopping a guy doing something bad. As goofy as villains like the Green Goblin or Doc Ock or the Lizard were, they still felt big and grand, where this feels like a much smaller scale. But again, that could be the point. It's kinda hard to judge right now because we have to see where they go with it. I feel like these movies might finally be building to that big, grand Spider-Man movie I was waiting for. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is some depth in this. I mean, there's especially a great scene where all these illusions are used to, like, drive Peter nuts and give into his nightmares. And it's a really great scene, and I haven't really seen that in other Spider-Man movies. I was kind of hoping the rest of the film would be like that, but for now, it's just kind of a teaser of what we might get from an actual big Spider-Man movie. So yeah, bottom line, like the last one, I think it's a good movie. Do I think it's great? No, but I do think it's better than the last one. And I think the idea is for them to kind of do the slow burn, and I'm actually really okay with that. But here's the other thing I haven't brought up yet. We're in a post-Spider-Verse world. To me, this is hands down the best Spider-Man movie, the one that has everything in it. It even has like every kind of Spider-Man in it. It's just amazing. So sequels to that, I'm much more excited for. Where sequels to this, I'd like to see, but I'm just not as amped up. And And I think that's saying something. The Spider-Man that has a spider pig in it is bigger and grander and more incredible than the actual Spider-Man movies that are just focused on Peter Parker Spider-Man. There's something really great, but also kinda wrong about that too. I guess I can't be too picky. I mean, it's not like we don't have a variety of Spider-Man movies to choose from, and it's not like we don't have a phenomenal one that's finally out and it's gonna get more movies. Maybe it's just the OCD fan in me that says, man, if we can take elements of the first series and the second series and this series and somehow combine them together, we can get that perfect Spider-Man movie. And yeah, I guess you could argue they did, and it's called Into the Spider-Verse. But you know what I'm talking about, just focusing on one Spider-Man, Peter Parker, doing his thing so everybody can be like, wow, I see why this is one of the great superheroes. As this series is now, I would not see why this is one of the great superheroes. I would just see it as another superhero series. A good one, but just another one. But as I said before, they could be building up to it. And if they are, fantastic. I'll wait, I'll totally see where they go with it. If not, then I say this is just another enjoyable superhero movie. And given some of the things we've gotten from other Spider-Man movies, I'd say that's good enough. It's the long-awaited Black Widow movie, and I do mean very long-awaited. For years, people have said this character has gotten the shaft, and after waiting what many argue was way too long for her to get her own solo film, only to wait even longer because of COVID, fans finally got the movie they kinda, maybe, sorta wanted. Yeah, the consensus on this film is that it was just another Marvel movie without anything that new or really a ton of charm that a lot of the other movies had, resulting in people either not liking it or saying it's just okay. I'm in the okay park, but I think for different reasons than a lot of other people are. The story is one of those that's really simple but also really complex at the same time. Taking place right after Civil War, Black Widow discovers that the Red Room, the organization that turned her and her sister into assassins, is still alive and well, and her sister is out to get them. Realizing they're gonna need help to take them down, they turn this into a family affair, bringing in their eccentric but still powerful father and mother. And that's kind of it. I mean, yeah, it does have the typical Marvel stuff. There's like one really bad assassin that's chasing her down, and there's the big action sequences that, yeah, half of them didn't need to happen, but it is what we're here for. And you got the super complicated strategies and one-liners that many argue are starting to show their age in this movie. Hell, they were starting to show their age a few Marvel movies ago. But I don't think that's the issue with the film. The issue for me comes down to what you see. The majority of this film, you just see Black Widow talking with her family. And personally, for me, I like that stuff. The family is really interesting to me. This is one of the few Marvel films where the side characters don't overstay their welcome. Some argue they're even more interesting than Black Widow. I guess I would agree, but I don't know. Part of the charm of Black Widow was she never said much. You could get across a lot in just an expression. She reminded me a lot of Indiana Jones that way. Like I love it in Avengers when she says,
You sure about this?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
To me, that was the equivalent of Jones going, ugh. Neither of those are clever or funny lines, but they work because that's the kind of characters they are. They're badass, but just do what needs to be done. They keep the speeches pretty short. But there's two important things you don't see a lot of in this movie. One is the action. Oh, there's lots of action, but it is not edited together well. This whole movie has kind of a Jason Bourne identity to it, and honestly, I don't mind that. I think it worked pretty well, and it was different. But when you get to the chase scenes and your eyes don't have time to focus on what's going on, and you just see a bunch of stuff shaking and cutting and exploding, and you don't even know who's where, that can get very tiresome. But the other important thing you don't see much in this movie, the villain. I sometimes had to remind myself who they were even fighting in this movie. Yeah, they said the Red Room, but who's in charge of the Red Room? I think you saw him like once in the distance. You rarely saw him. If this is the scumbag who's responsible for everything and they're trying to get to and they're trying to stop, I want to see more of him. I want to put a face and a personality to the main threat. And the tragedy is, they eventually do, and he's great. I can't be the first one to say he's like a Russian Harvey Weinstein, but this actor really makes him slimy and disgusting but diabolical, and he chews the scenery in the best way. but he's only given to us at the last third. Even Lord of the Rings had other villains you could focus on, not just Sauron. Hell, even Sauron had an eye. We didn't even get an eye throughout most of this. There's honestly not even much talk about him, like they're building him up. No, there's like none of that. So that made it really hard to get invested. A quick note too, I have no idea who this character is in the comics, but apparently they were done like Mandarin levels dirty. Like nobody was happy with how this character turned out. I almost forgot this even was a character in the movie, so it didn't really bother me that much. But with that said, I do think the film works just enough. Scarlett Johansson is still great as Black Widow, and all the other actors playing her family are also fantastic. It's another one of those films where there's a long scene where everybody just sits down, talks at a table, and the characters are so interesting, that could be the movie for me. I'd be totally okay just hearing them talk about the past and what it means to be this kind of family. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their failings as parents and daughters. All that stuff I find really fascinating. I also like that they did go for more of a darker look with this movie. I mean, if you were to show me this and tell me it wasn't a Marvel movie, I'd think it was some sort of spy flick or aggressive thriller. I know we've seen something similar in the Captain America movies, but I can't explain it. There's just something a little tougher and more aggressive in the way this is shot and the way it's paced. It really wants you to sit with the misery of what some of these characters are going through. It's not in a rush to get to the next punch or kick. So as a Black Widow fan myself, is this everything I've been waiting for in her own movie? Not really, but I wouldn't just say it's another Marvel movie either. I do think there's a lot of elements that help it stand out. And it did really keep my attention with the main characters and their acting. I guess if you go in with the mindset of it's good but not great, you might find enough surprises in there that make you glad you saw it. Not a glowing recommendation, but it's still a recommendation. Not the Black Widow movie we deserve, but the one we got. It's Shang-Chi! I'm sorry, that was the funniest joke in the movie. Marvel's first martial arts movie, and it's gonna sound weird, but I'm gonna review this in two ways. I'm gonna say what I think the majority of people going to see this movie will think of it, and then I'm gonna say what I think of it. I know that sounds weird, but there is a reason. And don't worry, I don't hate anything in this movie, just you'll see why in a minute. I think if you're a Marvel fan and you saw this trailer and you thought it looked really good, you're gonna think it's really good. This movie pretty much delivers on everything it promises. It's charming, it's funny, it's got some decent action. There's some decent moments of character building, particularly with the villain. I'm really impressed how Marvel movies are doing their villains a lot better. The guy is really sympathetic and charming to the point where you're almost wondering why he is the villain, and then as it keeps going, you figure out why. The leads all have the makings of great action stars, for the most part. Awkwafina's in this movie, and I'll be honest, the only other thing I've seen her in is Raya, and I thought she was kind of hit or miss there, and yeah, it's about the same here. I can see her getting on some people's nerves, but she did get enough laughs for me, and the movie did know well enough when she needed to say something funny and when she needed to just shut the fuck up, unlike some other comic relief. This movie made me realize how much I kinda miss these special effects martial arts movies, like The Matrix and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Hero. It's nice to see not only decent effects in a Marvel movie, but decent action. More than decent action, decent martial arts. Like this guy doing all the fighting, he's really, really good. So yes, you see the trailer, you say, that looks like fun. You're gonna have fun. Okay, now to my personal thoughts. When I saw the trailer, I thought this just looked like another Marvel movie, and yeah, I feel like I just got another Marvel movie. Which is still competent and well done, it's just not holding my attention that much anymore. Maybe that's because DC has really been on a roll lately, where they're doing something that's both light and also dark and funny and complex and unique, but also kind of standard. They kind of mix up everything. They're taking more risks. I didn't feel any risks in this movie. Honestly, I felt more risks in Black Widow. That's also a very middle-of-the-road movie, but it had a little bit more of a mean-spirited grit to it. When you think about how many people, or even animals, die or are tortured just because of this mean-spirited, dysfunctional family, that's just personally a little bit more up my alley. And to the film's credit, I don't think it's supposed to be really dark or gritty. It is supposed to be lighter, and that's fine. I just thought a lot of the new elements they added weren't really that interesting to me. Let me also make it clear, I'm a big martial arts fan. I can't even count how many times I've watched so many Jackie Chan fight scenes.
I was obsessed with them. I loved not only the way they were planned out and the way he moved and the creativity of the stunts, but also the way the camera was. He knew how to plan a shot where you could fully appreciate the movement and the planning behind a great fight scene. You saw all the hard work. The fight scenes are good here too, but I really think this should have been a martial arts movie before it was a Marvel movie. The special effects and green screen and laser beams and dragons and everything else, for me, distract from the flow of the fight. There's one shot where Shang-Chi does like 5 moves and ends up in this bus driver's seat. That was amazing, I wanted more of that. But the editing either cuts too fast, the background has too much going on, there's too many effects that are distracting you, so I surprisingly wasn't as amazed by it. And it's a shame because you can tell they put a lot of hard work into these fights. I think it's something like Hero, that had a lot of effects going on, but the martial arts knew how to be shot. They knew when to do it in slow-mo, they knew when to slow the camera down, they knew when to do it fast. They knew where to have the effects so you could fully appreciate the fight. But again, I'm talking as a 40-year-old who grew up with Jackie Chan movies and is getting kinda sick of Marvel. I'm clearly gonna have a bias. Even the climax felt weirdly underwhelming to me. I'm not sure if the idea is everyone reached like their center calm or something, I don't know, but everyone looks disinterested in this climax. Whether someone's fighting his father, or fighting his son, or being pulled in by a tentacle monster, or riding a dragon. Even the music seems bizarrely calm, and yeah, I know you want to mix it up, like you have some heart-pounding scenes and then some emotional slower scenes in your big climax, but almost all of it's done in this soft, underwhelming sound. I just couldn't get that into it. But okay, I really don't want to give the impression I thought this was a bad movie. I don't. When I saw the trailer, I had an idea what this film was going to be, and that's exactly what it delivered. How can I be angry at that? It wanted to give a light, crowd-pleasing Marvel movie with some good action, and that's what I got. Good for you, movie. You made a lot of money and everybody loved you. And for me personally, there was enough to hold my attention. I did want to know what was going to happen by the end. I just don't think I got into it the same way everyone else got into it. And that's why I really want to review this in 2 ways, because it isn't just my opinion, I think it's about trying to find what you at home will like. My thoughts aren't your thoughts. I want you to be able to listen to it and say, yeah, you might like this, or yeah, maybe you should skip it. I think the trailer really is a good indicator if you're gonna like it or not. If you say, yeah, this looks like fun, and Aquafina looks kinda goofy, and the effects are a little cartoonish, but that's what I like about comic book movies, then I think you're gonna like it fine. But if you're someone that's kind of getting sick of the Marvel formula and you want to see a martial arts movie where they really only focus on the martial arts, even then, I don't think you're gonna hate this movie. It just might not be the mind-blowing experience that some people are building it up to be. So if anything, I think I am more recommending it than not recommending it because people really seem to get into it. Just by the law of averages, I think it's worth checking out for that. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. What were your thoughts? Did you think it was fantastic? Think it was just okay? Or maybe there's some people out there that really hate it. I haven't come across them yet, but I'm sure they're out there. I just thought it was fine. No more, no less. Check it out and see if you get a kick out of it as well. It's the worst Marvel movie ever! I guess? I suppose Iron Man 2, Thor 2, and Captain Marvel just aren't a thing anymore? Well, okay, when this movie came out, it was absolutely destroyed by critics. And that led to a lot of bad press going in. Oh my god, this is the lowest rated Marvel movie on Rotten Tomatoes. What's gonna happen? And the answer was, not much. I mean, people that saw this movie either kinda liked it okay or didn't like it that much, but nobody was really that passionate about it. Truth be told, I think the most passionate critical response I've seen is my own, which is, I kinda love this movie for how bad it is. But honestly, I think I'm the only one to have that opinion. Thousands of years ago, these alien life forms, known as the Eternals, are sent to Earth to protect it from these other alien, demon, dog, alien thingies. More CG Marvel bad guys who look like shit. They're instructed not to interfere with Earth's history unless it has anything to do with these demon, dog shit CGI things, which they still do interfere with quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot of inventions they're giving them, and sometimes they're like, no, that's too advanced, scale it back. I definitely call that interfering. But in present day, the evil aliens come back, and the Eternals have to figure out why.
Cutting back and forth between present day and the course of history, we see how this quote-unquote family change over the years, grow a strong bond, and of course question when it's right to interfere and when it's right not to. Okay, so let me talk about the good stuff about this movie, because there actually is quite a bit. The ideas in this film are great. There's a lot of good questions being brought up about what it means to be a god, but let a civilization grow, and when do you interfere, when do you not? To blend in, they all have to look a little different. For example, one is like this little kid, and she has to stay a little kid forever, and over thousands and thousands of years, she gets tired of that. When they see humanity do awful things to themselves, they don't get in the way, and yeah, sometimes the things they break down over, I kinda say, well, wait, you've witnessed the history of humanity, this is what finally broke you? Like one character breaks down seeing the atom bomb, like, oh no, I never should have trusted them, and yes, that's a biggie, don't get me wrong, but if you watch the history of humanity and what they build and why they build it, this shouldn't be that big a shock. Like, a lot more people have died and been tortured. Do you history, bro? Oh, okay, anyway. There's one guy who becomes a Bollywood actor, and the way he gets around, never aging, is that he keeps saying it's his father or his grandfather, and yeah, the looks just seem to pass on through the genes and stuff. That's kind of clever. I like this as a Marvel film that's taking itself more seriously. It's going slower, there's a lot of conversations, and the acting is definitely more serious than other Marvel films, and I gotta give them credit for that. They're really trying to give a more mature movie. This is one of those movies where you could show 5 minutes from any part, and you wouldn't be able to figure out what's wrong with it. It looks totally fine. But when you realize that 5 minutes is all the movie is, then the problems start to make themselves very clear. To a point where, like I said, I think it's kind of comedic. Everyone has that same monotone way of talking that you hear in something like the Matrix films or sometimes Christopher Nolan. There's so many speeches, so much cutting around, and everybody just looks so serious, and they take the time to really let the moment sink in like, wow, that was a big thing that happened, but every single one of these characters is boring and the same. With the exception of the Bollywood actor, who sometimes gets a laugh, but yeah, he gets a little annoying after a while too. And this other guy who's looking to start a family, and yeah, I think it's just because he's the only one that's not talking with that monotone. Everyone else is completely the same. The comparison I always make is that it's like an X-Men movie if all the characters were Cyclops. But wait, didn't I say this is one of those so bad it's good movies? Like, how can you watch 5 minutes and be okay with it? And that's the entire movie, so it should all be okay. Well, I know this is gonna sound strange, but it's a subtle kind of bad. When you really question why these characters do what they do, how they do it, and the fact that they never change their expressions over all these years, it starts to become really funny. There's one character that makes fun of somebody, and so she changes him into a baby, giving him like the bonnet and bib and all that stuff. And he completely with a straight face looks down at himself and says, "Oh, I'm a baby." It is so flat and awkward, it's amazing. The opening shot is these cave people, and they see like a monster heading towards them, and the father just turns to the blank-faced son and says, totally calmly, "Run." And the monster just eats him like a shark eating Samuel L. Jackson. It is hilarious. Even the different ways these actors act bland is kind of fun. Seeing them all discuss what a strong bond they have, yet showing it in no emotional way, I'm sorry, really cracks me up. But like I said, I feel like I'm the only one. There were so many scenes in this movie where they would just cut from thousands of years ago to present day with almost no rhyme or reason, and I would just start laughing, and I was the only one in the theater doing that. I just couldn't help it. There was such a sense of self-righteous importance that was so not hitting the emotional mark, all I could do was laugh. With that said, I will say I observed kind of an interesting reaction to this film. From what I could gather, I didn't find a lot of people who hated this movie or loved this movie. Like I said, they either just liked it okay or just missed the mark a little bit for them. What got me thinking about this is that the first part of Dune was released this year too, and that was another film where a lot of people just sort of very blank-faced talk to each other, and there's a lot of conversations, and yes, the visuals were nice and the music was nice, but there wasn't a ton of action. And people really got into it. Now, even though I like that film a lot more than this, it does strangely get me excited that maybe people are opening up more to this, or that Game of Thrones crowd that doesn't really have a Game of Thrones to watch on TV right now, so maybe they're watching it at the movies. If that's the case, I'm weirdly excited to see where more big budget films are going to go.
While yes, I do see The Eternals as a bad movie, it does have a lot of promise. Maybe we could see more movies of big characters having big conversations about big ideas. And yeah, I still like a lot of action, but if you don't have much conflict or interest behind it, it doesn't matter. Which is ultimately the problem with this movie. But if a lot of people were like, yeah, I like the ideas, and I want to see more stuff like this, I am weirdly kind of excited. I wouldn't mind seeing Marvel, or really any kind of big budget movie, go more in this direction. Just, give us some people to like. You're usually pretty good at that, Marvel. But again, I can't act like I didn't enjoy this film. I just don't think it's on the level they were intending. When one of these demon turds kills one character that I couldn't care at all about, but then suddenly forms a human face and says, I understand now, my mission is clear, even though this thing has never talked before, this just cracks me up. It is just the right amount of weird, and it expects you to follow along perfectly. Like, no, we know when to let these moments sit and when to just rush into the next one. And they clearly don't. They have it 100% backwards. But like I said, I think I'm in a minority on this. I think the people who don't like it just see it as very dull, and the people who do like it see it as good enough. I see it as one of the first subtle bad movies. The same way you see a subtle good performance, like some people don't see what's so great about it, but you're like, no, really pay attention to it. Look at the little details and the little touches. It's the same thing here, just bad. So yeah, I don't really know if that's much of a review in terms of letting you know if you should see it or not. I guess I would say give it a chance, if for any other reason, just to hear kind of the interesting ideas and get a conversation going. It is a fun movie to talk about. But I guess the one thing we can all agree on is that if this is the new Marvel direction, it's definitely missing that key epicness. How often do I get an early screening for a disneycember review? A big thank you to those who invited me to Spider-Man No Way Home, and a heads up, at the time of recording this, I have no idea what the public thinks of this movie. So keep in mind, in this spoiler-free review, I have no reactions to compare this to. All I have to give are my general thoughts. And those are, next to Into the Spider-Verse, this is probably my favorite Spider-Man movie. Doesn't mean it did everything right. Oh god, no. There is a ton you can nitpick and rip apart about this movie, and trust me, I know there's gonna be other videos that do. But the things that work in it work so insanely well, I feel like it cancels them out. I swear this movie watched my review, as well as the reviews of other critics, I'm sure, of all the other films, and listened to the criticisms and listened to the strengths and said, yeah, we can fix that. And gave me the live-action Spider-Man movie I feel like I've always wanted to see. Last time we left Peter Parker and MJ, he was just exposed as being Spider-Man. The film cleverly doesn't turn everybody against him, it's more half and half. Some people see him as a hero, some people see him as a villain. I personally think this is very clever, seeing how constantly divided we usually are. Nevertheless, all the pressure not only starts to get to him, but his friends as well. Peter goes to Doctor Strange to see if there's a way he can somehow erase everyone's memory that he was Spider-Man, and, well, the spell goes wrong, the shit hits the fan, and suddenly, villains from the past Spider-Man movies arrive. Yeah, I don't think that's a spoiler, it's in all the advertising. And I guess I won't say any more after that, as yeah, that is kind of where it gets into spoiler talk, but I'll start off by saying one of the things I really enjoy about this movie is that for a good 20 minutes, these characters from the other movies are out of the picture, and I didn't miss them. I was enjoying where the film was going and all the choices and dilemmas and turmoils and everything else that these kids have to go through. They're not even really kids anymore, they're looking at colleges, and I'm glad they're addressing that they do look a lot older and that they're slowly entering adulthood. This is the first time I looked at Tom Holland and I'm saying to myself, wow, he's really looking like Spider-Man. But when the villains do show up, it's just as entertaining. I think it goes without saying that most of these villains come from Spider-Man franchises that didn't end on a high note. Most people didn't find their finales that satisfying, especially because they weren't supposed to be finales, but people hated them so much they didn't make anymore. This movie, for the most part, feels like it's giving these characters the finale they deserve, while still being its own unique Spider-Man movie. I said before in the other Tom Holland films that I feel like they were kind of playing the slow game, like it starts off with him as a kid and they never really feel that epic, like they're unlike the other movies where they're not self-contained, they always tie into the MCU and we don't get the really big themes and ideas and drama and everything that I really did like in the other Spider-Man movies. But like I said in the last one, I think they were building up to it, like this big epic Spider-Man movie is coming, you just gotta get through a few issues of Peter still establishing himself, just like the comic did. Well, this feels like that big epic movie. Because while yes, there are a lot of fun, lighthearted fights between Peter and Doc Ock and Green Goblin and so forth, there are some surprisingly heavy moments in this film. Heavy moments that, yes, will remind you of the other Spider-Man movies and sometimes maybe feel a little repetitive, but because these characters are so likable and so well built up and are telling the story in a different way with different characters in different places and circumstances in different order, still with the same themes and ideas that Spider-Man is centered around, it doesn't feel repetitive. It's kind of like when you see Lilo and Stitch or How to Train Your Dragon, like yeah, we've seen those kind of stories a million times, but when it's done with these characters in this way, it feels like you're seeing it for the first time. This was the same for me. It felt like it took all the strengths of the other Spider-Man movies, the deliberately slow pace of the Maguire films, the charm and humor of the Garfield films, and the self-awareness of Spider-Verse, and squished it all into this massive celebration of everything that I love about Spider-Man. But I don't want to give the wrong idea. This isn't the perfect movie. There is plenty wrong with it. Characters, particularly villains, change their motivations out of nowhere. A lot of the effects surprisingly aren't that good. They're not all terrible or distractingly bad, but outside of a few action sequences, all the effects look kinda cartoonish, which is ironic. There is a cartoon, and I think it shines a lot better at this because it just needs to look good, not realistic. There's weird moments that I guess had to be edited out for time. I remember there's one scene where a bunch of characters are entering an apartment and somebody's like, where's this character? Oh, he's staying in the truck. And it's never addressed why. I think this movie might be a little too excited to have some of these characters together and maybe they let them chat a little too long, particularly in the last third. I'm saying to myself, yeah, okay, cute, you can trim this down a bit. There is a mid-credit sequence that I think when you think about it is really gonna piss you off. Like a past film was promising something and then suddenly it's reneged and maybe leading to something else that, I don't know, is a weird direction to take it, but again, that could just be me. Some characters are trapped in places that you say to yourself, I feel like that character wouldn't be trapped in that place for so long. But you're so impressed with how another character trapped that other character that you kinda don't care. The pros in this movie more than outweigh the cons for me. But yes, there are things done in this movie that either changes the lore around that some people won't like, or some characters just do some stupid stuff out of nowhere that doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. But for me, it did everything so right, and I was so invested in what was going on, that I forgot about a lot of those moments really quickly. This is one of those films I would love to go back and see again with a crowd, just to see their reactions. I really do love now that these movies took their time, really let us get to know these characters and their interactions and their friendship and rivalries and so forth, so that when you did get to the big epic movie, it really did feel big and epic. It did what Spider-Verse did and built upon what you already know about Spider-Man, using it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. So I had a really good time, and I think you're gonna have a really good time too. But I could be wrong. What did you think? Do you think it was worth all the hype, or do you think it's another example of Sony trying to squeeze too much into their Spider-Man movies again? Let me know your thoughts by swinging on in and checking it out for yourself. It's Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. That's right, all three of them. I'm not gonna lie, I'm in the middle of watching everything everywhere at once, and yeah, it is a little weird that an A24 movie has a lot more multiverses than a Marvel movie does. I'll be honest, I was focusing a lot less on that and more on Sam Raimi directing a Doctor Strange movie than anything else. And as that concept goes, I had a great time with this. I should give a heads up, I'm going to go into spoilers in this review. If you want to know my thoughts without the spoilers, you can watch my Untitled Review Show episode, because this film, not surprisingly, does have a lot of spoilers to talk about. A team from another dimension named America Chavez seems to be traveling from dimension to dimension trying to find someone who can help her out. She thinks it's Doctor Strange, but the only thing is the last Doctor Strange in the last dimension tried to kill her off. She's hoping the one we're familiar with can help out, but unfortunately, Wanda is back and likes the idea of traveling to a different dimension where maybe her kids are still alive. She gets taken over by the Scarlet Witch, dark magic, something, it doesn't matter, and doesn't care who she hurts or even kills to get back her happily ever after. Doctor Strange vows to protect Chavez by any means necessary, and when I say any means, I mean any Sam Raimi means. Yes, he turns into a zombie at the end, has to fight off demons, has to go into a haunted house where there's a dark version of himself, has to stop Wanda from blowing people's brains up. Yeah, this is PG-13, but it is a hard PG-13. It is a Sam Raimi PG-13s. Hell, screw it, even his PG-13s are kind of PG-13s. This is like Drag Me to Hell PG-13. It's practically an R. Well, I think a lot of fans were hoping for different universes to be utilized in this and different characters from different Marvel properties to finally be introduced, and yeah, they are. Nothing too important is brought up in this. Yes, you do see the leader of the Fantastic Four, you do see Xavier, and yeah, I did kind of go insane when I saw the yellow wheelchair and the Danny Elfman music go da 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 da. Why is that so cool, just hearing Danny Elfman reference that 90s theme? The only major things that are probably important to know in this film is the introduction of Chavez, who can jump into different universes, and the fact that Wanda is killed off in the end, even though, yeah, they can probably bring her back in some way. On that note, it is a little weird that Wanda has to learn the exact same lesson that she learned in an entire TV show. If you saw my review of that though, you probably know I wasn't that huge a fan of the TV show and kinda thought this could have been delved into a lot better. Honestly, in a more dark and twisted way, and well, this is definitely a more dark and twisted way. When she sees her kids in another dimension, they're afraid of her, like they see her as this terrifying abomination. It is so like a monster movie. I just immediately thought back to Bride of Frankenstein when she sees the Frankenstein monster and screams. It's so eerily similar to that, and I love that. Sam Raimi clearly loves monster movies and the themes of monster movies. And yeah, it probably goes without saying, but if you're seeing this movie just to see Sam Raimi's take on a Doctor Strange film, you're gonna get what you're looking for. All the fun camera angles are back. All the creepy but also goofy imagery is exploited to no degree. His weird obsession with eye shit is all over the film. Even the first big fight kinda has a Spider-Man vibe to it. I was really having a good time. But as a lot of people have pointed out, that's kind of where it ends. It's just kind of a good time. And even then, I don't think everybody had that great a time. They were kind of asking questions like, hey, where did Chavez go? She kind of just disappears in the third act. Oh, there she is, huh? Guess she didn't leave that big an impact, even though it's supposed to all be about her. Why is Wanda learning the same lesson? How could these characters not take her out earlier? Did I think much about it? No, because I was just having too much of a good time watching Sam Raimi do a Doctor Strange film. But I get not everyone's gonna be won over by that. So I guess a lot of it does depend on what you're looking for. Me personally, I got exactly what I was looking for. Weird visuals, creepy imagery, some trippy ideas. Hey, did you know that when you go to sleep, your dreams are happening in a different universe? See, I love shit like that. I even kinda love the fact that the boner joke in WandaVision now is kinda justified. It really was just a troll joke because, yes, they are acknowledging they can go into different universes where cast members from X-Men movies play the same characters. And I'm not gonna lie, I think that justifies this cameo, and the fact that everyone got so upset about it makes me laugh at it even more. But yes, I guess from a storytelling level, there are issues with it that some people are not gonna be able to see past, and rightfully so. But I definitely think there's a lot of people out there like me that just says, who gives a crap? It's Sam Raimi and Doctor Strange being the most Sam Raimi and Doctor Strange they can. So take that for what it's worth. On that note, did you think this being a Sam Raimi film was enough to say it and you had a good time? Or did you find that distracting and found it took away from a lot? Let me know your thoughts and maybe I'll see you in the eye of another universe. It's Thor
Love and Thunder Spoiler Edition. If you want to hear my review without any spoilers, go and see the Untitled Review Show video, but if you want me to go into more detail about how this film is sometimes really good, but oftentimes really obnoxious, this is the vid for you. You've been warned. The director of Ragnarok is back, and maybe he gives a little too much Ragnarok in this. I was really a big fan of that movie and thought they really got the essence of what made Thor so much fun and big and epic, but also goofy all at the same time. This one definitely likes the goofy stuff a lot more. Like, Christ, a lot more. Thor has gone from dad bod to god bod, as they literally use that joke in the movie. That's not too bad. I'm not upset yet. And he leaves the Guardians of the Galaxy to a point where I'm kind of wondering why the hell he went with them at all. And discovers that Jane is back, but not for very long, as it looks like she has cancer. I'll be honest, I didn't dislike Jane in the movies, but I can't say I really liked her either. I didn't miss her not being in the last film, but giving her this disease, I will admit, is kind of instant investment. As soon as you see that, you're like, oh no, I hope she's okay. So I do think that was a clever addition. It also really justifies her being Lady Thor, or is it just Jane? I don't know how this works. There's a Lady Loki. I don't know, whatever you call her. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't very excited for her in this role, because again, she didn't leave that big an impact on me. I mean, yes, it could be worse. Kat Dennings could be Thor, although I will say she's in this too, and she's actually not that bad. For all the bad comedy in this movie, she's totally fine in this. But seeing her life force tied to this power and trying to figure out how to utilize it in the little time she has, and even trying to figure out what little time she has, was pretty interesting. Her powers are also pretty cool. I really love when she throws the hammer, it splits up into a million little pieces because that's what happened to it before, and then it all comes back together. That's really creative and pretty badass. The villain is also not bad. Christian Bale plays this guy who lost his kid and feels betrayed by the gods, and kinda rightfully so. The gods kinda seem like a bunch of assholes in this, and yeah, that is the idea. You sympathize very quickly with what he wants to do, but are still on the side of Thor, who wants to stop him. Like everybody's motivations, you do legit get in this. Honestly, all the elements are there, and what happens in the story is fine. If I was just to see this laid out in script form, I'd be like, yes, go, do it. But I think this is finally the MCU film where the Marvel humor completely destroys the film. There are just too many damn jokes in this, and a lot of them are just not funny. I feel like a lot of people have been making the argument that the Marvel humor is just getting a little too much in these films, and yeah, I agree, but it's very rare that that's what ruined a film. And I am telling you right now, I would have liked this fine if they just shut up with the jokes. Valkyrie is one of my favorite characters in this series, and her scenes are not only forgettable, but they are annoying. She brings out this little thing like, oh, is it a grenade? No, it's a little beatbox. Oh yeah, let's dance to it. Yeah. Oh, shut up. Hey, look, our ship is being guided by these screaming goats. Oh, that's funny for like a minute. No, they last the whole movie. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Oh my god, Christian Bale is being mad creepy to these little kids. They must be so afraid. Oh wait, the kid wants to be called something else because he saw a band.
I'm now known as Axel.
Astrid.
Axel.
Astrid.
I said Axel.
Astrid.
Axel!
Oh my god, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. I hate this, shut up, be a Thor movie, shut up! I'm sorry, I was actively annoyed throughout the majority of this movie. I don't know how Ragnarok balanced it out so much better than this. Again, I think the idea was it was still a Thor movie, and the jokes came from the characters. I like seeing Thor and Loki interact with each other. I like this weird Jeff Goldblum alien that, yeah, it's still Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum, but he's still a villain. He still has this threat that's kind of like Mojo from X-Men. It makes sense. Even though he's a goofy character, he's moving the story forward. In this, everything just comes to a complete stop for some unfunny jokes. Once in a while I'll get a giggle, but they're too few and too far in between. Now on that note, when this actually is a Thor movie, it is a pretty decent Thor movie. Like I said, I did surprisingly care about what happens to Jane in this movie, and when Thor and her aren't doing their stupid rom-com who broke up with who bullshit, I find I really do care about them when they discuss actual relationship stuff and their mortality and how much time they have. All that's really interesting. Even the climax of this film had me smiling ear to ear. Thor has to give his power to these children, and they all go and kick some ass and have little lightning abilities, and yeah, you would think this would be the lamest part, but they actually really have fun with it. And again, I imagine myself being a little kid watching this, and I would just find this so cool, and it looks epic and badass, and this is the kind of fun I'm looking for. But it's almost like they took the ideas and energy of Ragnarok and combined it with that terrible humor from Dark World. But the humor isn't just in little sections of the film, you know, like the moments with Kat Dennings. It's stretched out throughout the entire flick. And it was just too much for me. And it's a shame because the stuff they do right, I think is legitimately done right. Jane does eventually die, and you do feel legitimately bad. And yeah, there's an after credit sequence that at first I thought, oh my god, are they gonna bring her back? Was it all for nothing? And no, she goes to where a lot of the other gods die, and it feels right. It feels like a legitimately nice ending for a character that honestly I didn't have much interest in before. Had this movie kept that tone going and tying into the visual style that also looked fantastic and big and epic, but yeah, a little goofy, I think we could have had possibly the best Thor movie. But I don't know if it was the director or Disney or the writers or even just people improvising stuff on set, but the humor just absolutely nuked this film for me. You can tell everybody's trying, nobody's half-assing it here, but I think they just tried to lean too hard into a good thing. With that said, what were your thoughts? Because I guess this movie didn't do that great at the box office. Like, it didn't do terrible, but it did not do the numbers they were hoping. Is it the humor? Is it that just people are getting sick of Marvel movies? Maybe just the character Thor? I'm not really sure, so I kind of want to know your thoughts on it. Did you think it was great and you don't know what the hell I or other people are talking about? Do you think that this was just doing the same old stuff in the best way or even elevating it to new material? Let me know because some time has passed and maybe your opinion on it has changed since then. Whatever your thoughts, all I can say is I personally expected more Thor from Thor. Alright, here we go. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. A movie that had, I'll just say it, probably the best trailer of the year. I got goosebumps watching this trailer, so I was mad excited to watch this flick, and man oh man, I thought it was good. Yeah, sorry to be that a-hole again, but much like the first movie, I thought it was good, it was very impressive, but it just didn't connect with me the way it connects with a lot of other audiences. But again, with that said, it is good. I actually think it does a lot of things in this better than the first one, and some things a little weaker. I'll give you a heads up, this is going to be a spoiler review. If you want to see my thoughts on it without any spoilers, go ahead and see my Doug Reviews video on it. So you've been warned. If you don't want to know who Black Panther is yet in this and you want to discover it for yourself, go see the flick first. With that said, goddammit, I wish the General was Black Panther. I know everything was kind of pointing to Shuri being the Black Panther, and yes, that makes sense, she's the sister, and I hear that's what happened in the comic, it all checks out, but come on, Okoye is just so damn cool. However, I do buy her being a ruler. I kind of like this journey is very much trying to figure out how to be more diplomatic and figure out peace talks and reasoning with other sides and everything. That makes sense. I actually think that was done a lot better here than in the first Black Panther. In the first Black Panther, it feels more of like a physical struggle, like, you know, being the fighter and taking on pain and stuff like that. And yeah, there is definitely the diplomacy part too, but their future's decided by a big duel. Clearly the physical aspect is the big focus. Here, it's switched. You see her really talking with the villain, Namor, who is a really good villain. You see how his kingdom works and what he's all about, and she's kinda trying to see if she can find a middle ground or some sort of peaceful alternative, and yeah, it works, it really does. But then being pushed physically isn't addressed, and I think that's also part of Black Panther. I like that she figures out how to make that, I don't know, Black Panther juice, whatever the hell it's called, that actually turns you into this super strong character. Though seriously, what are the limits in these movies? She is literally impaled and Namor is burned alive. Can these characters die or not? But Shuri's journey is not a bad one, and honestly, given everything that's happened off-screen behind the scenes with Chadwick Boseman passing away and everything, it's amazing they made this movie as good as they did, and I can't imagine the pressure on this actress to take over that mantle. She's got a lot riding on her shoulders, and she rides it out pretty well. But yes, much like I said in the first Black Panther, I do think the weakest part of this Black Panther movie is Black Panther. The side characters, once again, are so much more interesting. I'm sure everyone has said Angela Bassett just knocks her performance out of the park, and they're right, she's fantastic. Namor is a great villain, though I'm sorry, I cannot take those little wings on his feet seriously. That's just too hilarious. I'm sorry, that never worked for me. But his backstory, environment, and especially his performance really does make us sympathize with him. To a point where I really do find it disappointing that his plan is pretty much every other Marvel plan. Destroy most of humanity because they suck, and make the world a better place because of it. And yes, while it's explained why he would see things that way and how this plan came to be, with Killmonger, I just felt where he was coming from. Everything from his performance to how he talked to what he said, I felt it 100%. Here, I see it. I see what he's talking about, but I don't feel it. Either because this plan has been done so many times in other Marvel movies, or because the film is juggling a lot. There's a lot of characters and ideas introduced in this, and a lot of them are very interesting, but other times it feels like they are fighting for room. Again, there's pros and cons in this. Every time either an older character or a newer character would be introduced, I always say to myself, oh, maybe she's gonna be Black Panther, and it started to mix it up a little bit to where it wasn't 100% predictable. But they can also be inconsistent. Martin Freeman is almost pointless to the story, and good God, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is painfully unfunny when she's trying to be funny. The irony is, when she's not trying to be funny, she's actually doing a pretty good job. I actually would love to know more about this character when, you know, they're not forcing in those tired Marvel jokes, which, yeah, there's not many in this, and they're not the worst, but you could just sense a producer saying, too heavy, add joke here. They don't do it a lot, it's not Thor Love and Thunder, but it does stand out sometimes. The action and effects, good God, are so much better than the first one. I feel like they took the budget of making Wakanda look good in the first one, which, by the way, you don't see a ton of Wakanda in this, and it doesn't really look that flashy when you do see it, but again, that could be because I think they put all that money into the action sequences. They heard people talking about it, and they said, okay, let's really work on these coming across as really big and really epic, and it does work. I was much more invested in the fighting in this, not just for the choreography and the effects, but also the ideas behind it. These underwater characters are a pretty good threat. It probably goes without saying the tributes to Black Panther and Chadwick Boseman are both really well done, and they do make it clear there is a difference. When they're doing the funeral in the opening, that's saying goodbye to Black Panther. When you see his image all throughout the Marvel logo, that's saying goodbye to Chadwick Boseman. And then at the end, when she closes her eyes and thinks about him, that's a tribute to both. But even with that, as you're feeling that great loss, and man, the funeral is so heavy and everything, you suddenly gotta go through it again with Angela Bassett's character. And yes, I understand why they did it. They want Shuri to be the leader and step up, though does she at the end? I'm still a little confused how that worked out. I know she's Black Panther, but is she still ruling? I didn't quite follow that. But you know what I mean, we already had some big emotional goodbyes and funeral scenes, and then we have another big emotional goodbye and funeral scene. I'm sure they couldn't think of a way out of it, and yes, it is impressive we got this well-made movie, as well-made as it is given everything that happened in real life. But that stuff is a tad noticeable and does get in the way a little bit. But like I said, it is a little bit. I still think this is a very emotional, very entertaining movie. It just doesn't speak to me like I think it speaks to a lot of other people, and to be fair, I don't think it's supposed to. I thought the first Black Panther movie was good, but not great. I had some issues with it. But there's people that really connect with it on different levels, and yeah, I get that, and go ahead, keep doing it. It's a good film to connect with. For me, I see them as decent, impressive films, and again, kind of for different reasons. Some parts excel better than the last one, and some parts come up a little short, but nothing's really super damaging. They both have very powerful emotional moments that are trying to evolve what the Marvel formula is, and I really admire them for that. But what'd you think? Did you think it was better than the first film? Do you think it doesn't hold a candle to the first film? Or do you just admire it for pulling off as much as it did, given everything that's happened in the real world? Let me know your comments below, and I'll see you next time in Wakanda.
It's Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, and man, did this movie have a journey. This movie got pretty ripped apart by critics, had a surprisingly okay audience score, was a big hit the first weekend at the box office, and then dropped hard, man, like really, really hard. Quantumania went from one of Marvel's biggest hits, like, oh man, are they still on top of the A game, to just one of their biggest failures. Like, man, everybody was talking about the drop this movie had. My personal thought was, yeah, it wasn't that good, but it was almost good, kinda. Oh, except for all that stupid, The bottom line, I didn't hate it, I was just a little annoyed by it. I appreciate the legit good things in it, but they were not enough to overshadow the things that are very tired, very dated, and very clearly need to change at Marvel. Now, like I've said before, this Disneycember, this is gonna be a spoiler review. If you wanna know my thoughts without me ruining the story or what happens or anything, go see my Untitled review show about it. I'm definitely gonna ruin some surprises in this, you've been warned. Scott and Hope are living the rich life, quite literally in some respects, as he has a new book that seems to be doing well, and she has her own business, and they also have a daughter who, you guessed it, likes to go to protest, because that's just what writers in their 40s think all kids do now. Like, there's nothing else to it. We don't even know what they're protesting. It's just, oh, protest, so ooh, they fight for stuff that matters, even though we won't say what that stuff is that matters, because, you know, it's a little bit more vague and safe that way. Yeah, I don't like this trope. But to the character's credit, they don't focus on it long, and she's not really that bad. She's not really that good either. As we discover with the entire family, including Hank and Janet, get sucked into the quantum realm because Janet just never really talked about the quantum realm much. I mean, really, all these years later, she never said there's like this evil bad guy down there and what she went through. It's weird, it's bizarre, but whatever. Marvel, comic book, just to make the story plot action happen. I'm not that picky. When they get there, though, they discover this incredible world that's both gigantic and tiny at the same time. Yeah, actually, I dig this idea. I'm liking it so far. But there's an evil ruler named Kang the Conqueror. He, I guess, wants to conquer. That's his thing. He wants to conquer this realm and all realms, and yeah, he's played well, but that's about all I know about him. And yeah, I didn't find him that interesting. Most of the characters in this I did not find interesting, but again, to the film's credit, I didn't usually find them annoying either. Usually, we'll get to that. This guy had such a good lead-in with Loki, sort of playing this different version of himself, but he's kind of like loopy and flaky and both incredibly in control and not in control at the same time, and they just did so much with it. I got so excited. And I like the fact that this Kang is really different from the one we saw in Loki. It is like a completely new person, and that is what I want. But you know what everyone's saying. He's supposed to be the new Thanos. He's the big threat. At the end of the movie, there's like a ton more of him. And if this is his first act of evil, I'm not that impressed because, okay, Thanos was built up. We didn't really know what he was about, and honestly, he was so built up and so vague, people thought they wouldn't be able to follow through on the promises they were giving. He's just not gonna be that threatening. We're sick of him. He hasn't even shown up yet. We're just sick of him. But when he did, his plan was interesting. His backstory was interesting. His thought process was interesting. Everything about him, even if we disagreed with it, was interesting. This guy plays him well, but I don't know what he's about. I don't know why he wants to conquer everything. Why does he even want the quantum realm? Why does he want to expand? What's he gonna do? And then on top of that, he's just kind of taken out of the picture. But again, there's all these different versions that are coming. And good God, seeing these different versions of him like he's in an SNL sketch sure doesn't make me scared of him more. The world itself is probably the best thing about it. I saw this on IMAX in 3D, and I was really glad I did, because again, I didn't take too much out of the movie, but what I did take out of it does stay with me, because I did see it on that big screen with the 3D glasses and everything. And this world does look great. I get the feeling even if you don't see it on the big screen and with the glasses, it's still gonna look really, really good and really creative.
So it is nice to see an Ant-Man movie where things go really big in scale, pardon the pun. And hell, I actually really like a scene where he acts a lot like an ant. Like there's kind of all these different versions of him and they're all like panicking, not knowing what to do, but then they all kind of work as a hive mind and they try to build up to something, and it's kind of different minds, but one mind at the same time, kind of like how ants work. It's really clever. I honestly really wanted more stuff like that. Like if there's just an army of hymns going after the bad guy, that would kind of be interesting. Like make the fight abstract, just something different, but it's just another big army, a Star Wars fight, something that, yes, is grand and big, but I don't really know much what they're fighting over, what they're fighting about. The family dynamic isn't that interesting because, yeah, there are characters just keeping things from others just to kind of keep things from others, and again, the daughter, while not awful, does kind of feel like an archetype, and all this humor, all this dialogue, it just feels like copy-paste from other Marvel movies. And it's not like they were terrible in other Marvel movies, but they're just old. I mean, how long have they been making these films? At some point, you really gotta change up the ingredients and make something new, because we're just getting sick of the same meal over and over, just with a slightly different spice. For a long time, the image everybody associated with Marvel doing bad was She-Hulk twerking with Megan Thee Stallion, which, yeah, I thought was pretty cringy, but it's a comedy, a streaming comedy. I can cut it a bit more slack. MODOK has become the official mascot for everything that's wrong with Marvel right now. I have seen this picture of him on so many title cards, mine included, as the reason Marvel has been going downhill. So, okay, what is wrong with him? Well, first off, as you can plainly see, it's a terrible effect. In Marvel, we don't always need the effects to look spectacular. There's plenty of movies that have bad effects and they're still good. We like them. But this is just an uncomfortable bad. Nobody likes looking at this thing. You don't look at it and just kind of laugh at how strange it is. Like I know they were going for. You look at it and you're just uneasy. Second, the idea of taking this bad guy from the first movie that, let's be honest, I think most people have forgotten about, and bringing him back as this character is not the worst, because again, he is a side villain. He is supposed to be kind of a comic relief, but it's not a joke that pays off. And I feel bad because I can see people like in a writing room coming up with this idea. Like, hey, remember the bad guy from the first film? Like, didn't something with the quantum realm happen with it? Like, what if he's MODOK? Like, we haven't done MODOK yet, and how are we gonna make that work? Like, there is a nugget of smart in here, but it just isn't executed right. And it doesn't make things better that every scene feels like it's either trying to drag out and interrupt the action or the drama because, you know, that's what Marvel movies do. We start to get dramatic and then we throw in some dumb jokes or over-explaining or something, but they very clearly wanted to turn him into a meme. There's a line about him being an asshole that just, you can tell, was made so that people would put big white text on a GIF. This is coming from someone who has tried to force many cringy memes in the past. I know it when I see it. But here's the thing, this would not be that big a deal. Honestly, I think most people would look past it and kind of forgive it and just move on to whatever the next cool thing is, but that's kind of the problem. There is no next cool thing here. People aren't excited for what Kang's gonna do. Nobody looks at the stadium of different versions of him and is like, uh-oh, I can't wait to see that. Nobody's hearing the lines and are like, wow, I got really invested in that, or oh man, I laughed really hard at this joke or this line, or man, what an amazing story or development I haven't seen from Marvel before. It's just more of the same, but on a bigger scale. Again, the one thing I can say was different was maybe the world itself. The world does look cool and has a lot of imagination in it. I really like looking at the different creatures in the background and everything, but I don't get much of a personality from it. Bill Murray is in this, and he's not in it for long, and yeah, he's been in lots of movies where he's not in it for long. In fact, sometimes his best roles are in movies he's not in very long, but he just feels completely wasted in this. Oh, and I don't mean it that way. Actually, no, you can take it that way too. Take it both ways. He's just not utilized in this. Anyone can play this part. So yeah, look, I don't want to give the impression like this is just a god-awful movie, because I don't think it is. There is a lot to appreciate in it, but the stuff that doesn't work about it is starting to get on our nerves because it just feels too safe, too rehearsed. It's impressive the MCU has come this far and now they're doing streaming shows and all of them have connected. I mean, I'm still blown away any of this happened. I remember being a little kid wishing something like this would happen, and I'm thankful for just all the movies we've gotten and how well put together they did have all this. But yeah, if you're gonna keep us invested in wanting to see more, then you really gotta challenge us more. You gotta give us things we haven't seen or even stuff we didn't know we wanted to see. That's this film's biggest problem. It's not the worst, it's just way too recycled. And for a cinematic franchise that's lasted this long and tries to get bigger and bigger, you have to do more than just look nice. You have to give us more of, you have to give us more. It's the son of a bitch who didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Yep, I'm the one. This is like the one MCU Phase 4 movie that everybody adores and I didn't like. I will say this, it's a movie I can very easily see why people would like, and I don't think this is a setup where it's like Way of Water where people are just liking it because it's pretty and come on, it was a nice enough time kind of thing. No, I can see why people would legit get into the story and the characters and the fact that this is a finale. In many respects, this is a very satisfying way to end this trilogy. Like I said in my Untitled Review Show video though, it really is death by 1,000 cuts, so it is something where I can see why someone would look at basically what happens in the story and say, yes, I was emotionally involved, I liked seeing how this all comes to an end. But for me personally, the little things were just too many and added up to being too distracting. And to make things worse, I know so many people that said, well, go back to it, let it sit for a little bit, maybe you'll return to it and like it a little bit more, and oh god, you're just gonna hate me even more for this? I kinda liked it even less. Look, I'm just gonna give you a heads up. I knew that review was not gonna be liked. People were gonna disagree with me. I was gonna be alone on this, but I just couldn't lie. I had to give my real thoughts on the movie, and that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm just also gonna go into spoilers. Maybe to help you understand a little bit more, or maybe just to make you hate me more. I don't know, but I like talking about movies. I like hearing your thoughts about movies. So even if you disagree, share why you disagree or what points about my arguments you think are not as strong as the positives of the movie. I'm really okay with it. That's one of the reasons I like doing movie reviews. I like hearing different points of view so I can find out more about people and what the mass general public gets into. With that said, okay, here's more detail why I didn't get into the movie with spoilers. You've been warned. For starters, I actually do think the story of this is a very satisfying conclusion. The conclusion it's all been building up to? No, but we'll get to that in a minute. That's not too distracting for me. Star-Lord finds himself missing Gamora and constantly drinks himself into a drunken stupor, but that's suddenly interrupted when Adam Warlock, the guy from the end credits of the last movie, tries to get revenge and seriously damages Rocket. Rocket is knocked out and taken out of most of the main story, but not out of the movie itself. We get a lot of flashbacks showing what he's gone through. How he was experimented on, the other animal friends he got close to, just all the stuff you've ever wondered. How can he talk? Why is he so intelligent? And yeah, is he a raccoon or not? To figure out how to save Rocket, they have to go to side quest number 1. Yeah, this is always kind of a regular in Guardians movies. It's fine, it's always an excuse to see more cool visuals and weird stuff. And on the way, Star-Lord bumps into Gamora and tries to once again see if they can work as a couple. But as that's going on, they're constantly being chased by the High Evolutionary, an evil mastermind who experimented on Rocket, and it turns out has done quite a few experiments trying to create the perfect race. Though that race doesn't have to be humans. They discover basically another Earth that's almost identical to ours, except they're all animals. They befriend a married couple who tells them about the High Evolutionary and how he's the one that did all this. And when he discovers he's being threatened not only by the Guardians, but by some of the animals themselves, he wipes out their entire civilization. Which it looks like he's done several times. Yep, anytime there's anything even the tiniest bit wrong, any defiance, any crime, anything like that, he destroys everybody and starts from scratch again. So all of this sounds right. It's about what I would expect from a Guardians movie, especially a finale. Since we are going into spoilers, I think it's pretty cool that none of the Guardians die in this. I really feel like the trailer was building up not everybody was gonna get out alive, and I thought it was really cool that they all do. The team just splits up. In a series where a lot of characters die from a director who really likes to kill off his characters, it was kind of cool that nobody gets the axe in this. That's not to say at all there aren't plenty of fake outs. There's one moment where Rocket's like going to animal heaven, which I don't know. I feel like I'm seeing this more and more in movies. It kind of feels like a tired trope, but I like Rocket. I like these characters. It's not a big deal. But they tried to do it again with Star-Lord, who I guess just forgot his mask and rocket boots, which he's had in all the other movies, but whatever. I didn't really fall for it. It just felt like a cheap fake out, but again, not a huge deal. James Gunn's usually really good at balancing these super dark, super unpleasant ideas with some really, really dark comedy that has just enough hope to get you through it. Like, you don't quite hate the world after seeing it. It just makes you feel good enough. Hell, honestly, the first Guardian film is pretty upbeat. I just saw his movie Super, which is like one of my new favorite superhero movies because you don't really know if it's positive or negative or who's the good guy or the bad guy. I mean, it's just everybody a bad guy. It's hard to tell. It really turns what we know about superheroes on its head and just leaves you with this strange feeling of unease, but maybe hope? That's not to say that's what this needs to be. I'm saying they try to go to so many dark, melodramatic areas that just seem so overwhelming and so in your face, but also really overdone. Everybody in this movie screams at the top of their lungs. Now, give everybody credit, they're at least showing some range of emotion, but like the villain in this, every other line is a yell. Even when he doesn't need to yell or things are going his way, he always yells in anger. He is so not interesting to me. It's so bizarre what scenes are overly dramatic and what scenes aren't. For example, we get to know this married couple a little bit. They're helping him out to get to know the High Evolutionary and to find him and everything. But then the entire civilization is taken out. Holy shit, what a dark, crazy idea, but it's almost never mentioned. Nobody says, oh man, that poor married couple, oh my god. Yet there's a scene where we're introduced to these giant squid monsters and Mantis is like, oh, they're afraid, and she touches them and starts crying. What the hell's that about? Like the editing, that can never let you just sit in a moment. Anytime they're even just having a conversation, it has to cut like 20 times per second. And I really like the Guardian movies because I feel like I can be in these worlds. But even with that said, the worlds are kind of lame looking to me. Like when they go to this kind of space intestine place that looked okay-ish. I mean, at least there was a little color, but there's this weird overexposed graininess that can look good in some movies, but really doesn't here. It just was not satisfying to look at. They do this walk in a line 3 times in this movie, and that's like one of my favorite tropes. I'm always a sucker for that, but by the end, I was sick of it. Like they just always wanted an applause moment. The humor, one of my favorite things from Guardian movies and just James Gunn movies in general, just feels like the generic typical MCU Phase 4 humor. It just isn't that funny and feels crazy dated. I don't know, maybe I needed a better audience to watch it with because the audience I saw it with just didn't laugh at all. It was so rare that I ever heard anyone chuckle. Maybe if I was just with a better crowd, maybe I would get more into it, but it was silent during all these moments where they were leaving pauses like, oh, you're gonna laugh here. Even the story, the one thing I said was probably the best about the movie, the more I thought about it, had a lot of things that didn't add up. Why was Adam Warlock in this movie? Why did they build him up at the end of one of those films? Why is Gamora in this movie? I was really excited to see what they were gonna do with this. I love the idea that it's a different version of her that hasn't met Star-Lord. Can they fall in love? Can there be a relationship here? And I was honestly leaning towards, no, there shouldn't be. Wouldn't that be interesting? But it's kind of decided at the beginning, and honestly, it could be figured out in one conversation, and they have that conversation. But then Star-Lord is so obnoxious, constantly trying to convince her to go back with him, and it's not funny, it's just annoying, to a point where I don't know why she's there, because suddenly, it's not about him hooking up with Gamora, it's about him reconnecting with his Earth dad? What? Is that what this is about? This was all building up to this ending? Like, I don't know, maybe there's something you could explore here, but it doesn't seem like that's where it was starting, but maybe you could argue that's where it was going, but is it? It just seems like they're making bad jokes and bad complaints and arguments at each other that just gets grating, and again, it's just more shouting, continual shouting. Star-Lord is apparently so bummed that Gamora is gone, he can't even have a day sober. They always have to carry him off. They're like, oh, he's drunk again? But they had that Christmas special where, yeah, he was bummed, but he seemed functional. He was okay. Hey, on that note, remember that him and Mantis are brother and sister? That doesn't play into anything. Why did they have that? Hey, remember that team Stallone was the head of and they made it look like they were going to give them a movie or something? Okay, there they are. Gamora's with them and bye. That's the only reason you were here. But then again, I'm still not sure why Gamora was here. You could have just taken her out and made this about Peter reconnecting with his roots and his father and his home. Like, honestly, if that's what this was about, if that really was the focus, I'd be all over this. But it just doesn't seem to have that much focus. The only thing that was pretty flawless to me was the backstory with Rocket, which it's pretty impossible not to get invested. It's these cute little animals you know are going to die. And again, it doesn't bother me that much because that's kind of what you want to see happen in this arc. I mean, you want to see it in that you don't want to see it. You like these animals. You don't want to see anything bad happen to them or anything more bad happen to them, and you know it's going to. But when it does happen, they play this big dramatic music like it's such a shock, and clearly it's not. And they reuse that music over and over and over like they want 20 scenes where it's supposed to be tugging at your hearts, and you just kind of become brain dead to it after a while, or at least I was. I don't know, maybe I just held these movies up on a pedestal, or at the very least the second one. I liked the first one, but the second one I really found to be an unbelievable Marvel movie. Like, it's one of my top 5, maybe one of my top 3, so maybe you can just understand that's where I'm coming from. I really wanted that level of excellence again. But one, the ingredients are there. I feel like if you just show me the bullet points of this story, I would say, okay, tweak a few things so they make a little bit more sense to the stuff that was shown before, but you got something here. This is a good finale. And two, people seem to really be emotionally invested in this, and they did get involved, and they did feel bad, and they did have these just big cry moments seeing these characters that we've really grown to like go through a lot of pain. So there is a part of me that gets it. And look, if you are one of those people, and you probably are because most people were, that really got emotionally involved, I do follow it, and I don't want to take that away from you. I mean, what, if you just connected with Rocket or Star-Lord or any of these characters and maybe it connected to something in your life that you can relate to, what am I supposed to say? Don't do that, you're dumb? No, let it connect with you, absolutely. Movies are art, and art is subjective, and everyone's gonna have a different reaction. I just like giving different points of view on something. If I really don't like something, I'm not expecting you to think the exact same thing. I like hearing the different responses people have to movies, even if it's to a film I hate, which this is not a film I hate. It's a film I want to love, but it got on my nerves. But it's also a film I can very easily see why someone would enjoy. Like I said, when I first did my review of it, I gave a little sign of the cross and said, okay, tell me what you think, because I just knew I was going to be alone on this. But again, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to say what I really think about something. But that doesn't mean it has to be your opinion or we're going to fight about it or anything like that. I honestly like hearing something I couldn't get into, other people got into, and it really moved them, and it brought them to a place that had them feeling genuine, even important emotions. So always keep that in mind, whether it's me or someone else that has a different opinion on a film. Don't feel like you have to change your opinion or change somebody else's opinion. Just give your thoughts on it, and maybe people naturally will see something different. I haven't seen anything different with this film yet, but maybe down the line I will. Because I do like this world, and I do like these characters, and I do like the setup for this finale. It just had way too many distractions for me to fully give myself emotionally to it. But like I said, I'm in the minority on that, and I think that's a good thing. I want people to get something good out of this, because I don't think there's any bad messages in it. I think there is some strong stuff that should have the impact it's clearly trying to make. It's a film that's clearly not for me, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm really happy is for a lot of other people. Well, I've said before and I'll say it again, man is Disney having a rough year. Lowest MCU opening ever. Yikes. As you may recall, I didn't really care for the original Captain Marvel. I didn't hate it, but I thought it was pretty boring and even a little pandering. I didn't get too much into WandaVision, but I guess Rambo in the series was fine, I guess? I don't know, she didn't leave that much of an impression on me. But then I really liked Miss Marvel, which yes, at times could be a little Disney Channel-ish, but the style of the show and the energy of the main character I thought brought a lot of freshness to it. So that's a character I like, a character I don't like, and a character I have no opinion on. I guess I didn't really know what to make of the movie from the trailers, apart from, yeah, like everybody said, it did look like a Disney Plus movie. But I'm not gonna lie, after I started hearing the reviews, I weirdly got more excited for it. Oh, not because the reviews were good, quite the opposite. Some people were calling this a disaster, like the worst Marvel movie ever made. And it's not from those people that, you know, always have those thumbnails that have like an evil Mickey Mouse on it or something like that. It was from people who usually look at something objectively. And I was intrigued by this. But then I'd also hear people say, it's okay, passable at best. Like, I certainly didn't know anyone who loved the movie, but I knew some people that thought it was fine enough. And after finally watching it, I hate doing this fence-sitting shit, but I do honestly see where everybody is coming from. My personal take is, the movie is bad, but it's not the kind of bad that really annoys me too much. It's gonna sound weird, but the best film I can compare it to is Five Nights at Freddy's. A lot of critics absolutely hated that film, and I was more on the side of, it's bad, but there's like half a good film in here. Like, it almost works. I could see how it could work. So on the one hand, I can definitely see how some people would say, this is fine, it's passable, it's okay, but yes, for the mistakes both this and Five Nights at Freddy's make, it's incredibly easy to see why so many would also hate this. And while there are several issues with the movie, the number one problem is very easy to point out. The editing. The editing is atrocious. Like, top 10, some of the worst I've ever seen. All throughout the movie, I was constantly asking, wait, when did that character show up? Wait, where are we now? Wait, where did that character go? Wait, this character is this character now? What, did that character even land? What's she doing in the middle of the town? In a movie where people keep switching places literally in a millisecond, you need a phenomenal editor on this, and either that person was there originally and Disney kicked them out, or there was just a bad one at the start. The movie feels like it's supposed to be a half hour longer, and then somebody came in and said, nope, cut out 30 minutes, and it hurts everything. There's a lot of that bad ADR where somebody might turn their head or we get a far away shot and somebody's suddenly explaining all this exposition. There's emotional moments that just come out of nowhere and have no build-up whatsoever. And I think it doesn't help that the film does not have much of a visual language. I don't remember what any of these places look like. They travel from world to world, place to place, and I can't tell you one detail about one location in terms of how it looks. But with that said, I can't say I was ever bored, and I can't say I was ever annoyed. In fact, if anything, sometimes the editing has a little bit of that Eternals feel, like it's just so bad and so out of nowhere self-important that I did kind of chuckle one or two moments. But even outside of the irony, there are a few things I enjoyed. I'm sure I'm not the only one to say Kamala Khan comes out of this pretty much unscathed. It makes sense, she's the most interesting out of all of them, she brings his real life and energy to the movie. All the other actors have what I can only describe as a half performance. And it doesn't mean anyone is half-assing it, I don't mean that. I mean, everybody has half a piece of the puzzle and the other half is missing. For example, Rambo is fine, she's acting okay, but I just don't know that much about her and they don't give her much of an identity. Brie Larson is definitely better this time around compared to the other times I've seen her play the character. She still does most of the comedy good and some of the serious moments work out okay. But the other serious moments, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of old school Kevin Costner, like maybe in this person's head there's just a totally different interpretation of what sounding tough and heroic sounds like. But a lot of people liked old school Kevin Costner and a lot of people like Captain Marvel, so I don't know, I just never followed either. The villain, played by Sawe Ashton, got a lot of flack for being another boring Marvel villain, like the ones from the early days. And I have to disagree. Oh, not that she isn't written like one of the most boring villains, I mean, that is absolutely true. But I've never seen an actress try so hard to find an identity with absolutely nothing to work with. Every second she's giving these crazy eyes, she's sneering, she's snarling, she's saying lines in the strangest, most over-the-top way, putting pauses at the weirdest moments. Imagine that boring bad guy from Guardians of the Galaxy, but the facial expressions of Onatop the whole time. She's single-handedly the worst and best thing in the movie. I was always entertained by her. Once in a while, there's a unique idea that sparks a little life into the film. Scenes where kittens have to eat people in order to save them. To the song Memory from Cats is a little unique. They go to a planet where their language is song, which is actually actually so clever, I can't believe it hasn't been done before. Like, there's definitely movies and shows where people go in and out of song and they're like, oh, this is a weird way to communicate, but literally every word is a song? I can't believe I haven't seen that before. I'm not saying this is the first one to do it, but it might be the first major production to do it, and it is a little fun and unique, and I'm not gonna lie, if I saw this in something like Thor, Love and Thunder, I'd probably be annoyed by it because there's already too much of that, but here, in a movie that drastically needed more energy, I found it very welcomed. And yeah, at times, them switching places with their powers is also a really cool addition. But yeah, for a film that does throw so much at you, so much talking, so much exposition, so much explaining, it's also really, really underwhelming. When it got to the climax, I actually kind of refused to believe it was the climax. I mean, a part of me was happy, like the film's not very long, but I was also like, wait, no, that can't be it. That was so nothing. This is a Marvel movie? Like, a Marvel movie that was released in theaters and that's what we're given? And again, whenever they had to do like the big emotional moments, like, oh man, these people mean so much, and the connections and the relationships and stuff, it's comically empty. I feel like this is the Marvel movie you put on in the background when you're getting work done. Because that's the thing, I could follow it just enough to get what was going on, though I didn't really know much about the details. I was constantly asking about the details, but I still got the general gist fine. So I can definitely see why some people would say this is totally okay, it's passable, but if you're someone that really likes to study the epic size of Marvel, the editing, the effects, the pacing, the planning, like the anti-Martin Scorsese, like you really see Marvel as just super cinema and this amazing achievement, yeah, you're gonna hate this. Personally, I really enjoy Marvel films and find it really impressive they've come as far as they have for this long. But none of them are my favorite movies. I think maybe Guardians 2 and Infinity War I went back and watched a few times, but even though I greatly enjoy them and appreciate them, I don't put them on a lot. There are scenes I'll watch over and over, like the end of Endgame or some action sequences, but it never quite had the hold on me. I think it did for a lot of other people. But again, I do really enjoy them. I've seen them all, and I think it's phenomenal they pulled them off as well as they have. But because I'm not really that obsessed with them and I don't really study them or anything like that, a film like this doesn't bother me as much. But I totally acknowledge it could really bother you. I think it's similar to like my thoughts on Moulin Rouge. I hate that movie. It just has those tropes and cliches I hate, but a lot of other people see them too and they just overlook them because they like everything else about it. And that's totally legit. I can't say I like this movie, but it didn't annoy me. It didn't get under my skin. It honestly gave me roughly what I thought a movie like this would be like at this point in time in the MCU, which, as a lot of people have pointed out, hasn't been doing that great. There is an end credit sequence that I won't spoil, but I will admit does give me a little excitement for what might be coming next. If you know what I'm really into, you know I want to see the MCU tackle this. And yes, while the effects in that scene and pretty much the whole movie weren't that great, I go to see MCU movies, hell, just comic book movies in general, for the characters, for the ideas, for the spectacle. The spectacle doesn't have to look real, it just has to look impressive. And the Marvels is definitely not impressive. If you're willing to just completely turn your mind off and just listen to some good old-fashioned MCU tropes, this is good enough. But if you're hoping to see the MCU finally pull themselves out of a rut, suffice it to say, this is no Marvel.